So please talk. Otherwise, what will happen if you all, some of you do not talk to me, mean that I don't know on the other side. So if you have any questions or whatever, please contribute, right? So though it's recorded for the others, but while people are online, better that you say yes or no, then I know that on what's happening because we are on virtual, right? So we are moving to risk management, which is part and parcel of international trade, right? So we have covered with this session. I think we will be completing the entire trade. So we will be moving on to the other section of foreign currencies, and we are most towards the Foreign Exchange Act and the foreign currencies that will be discussed here in after. So with today's session, we will be completing the entire trade. So you have learned what is correspondent banking. You have learned what are the payment methods, right? Then we have previous class we went into how to trade finance. We mean how do you finance trade? Now we are we are going through the risk associated with international trade. So the picture talks, right? The picture appears in the screen, talks the risk. So the risk could be, you can't totally eliminate the international risk, right? But these are inherent risks with international trade. So let us look at, so the objective of today learning objective would be end of the session. You know what is risk involved in international trade, type of risk associated with international trade. Yeah, we will look at the Incoterm risk. That is also one of the key area Incoterms when it comes to responsibilities and risk transfer and the cost. These are key factors, especially the risk and the responsibility, more relevant in the risk management process, right? And mitigating factors, how to reduce the risk. How you can't eliminate the risk, but how to reduce the risk, if at all, right? So we will be looking at mitigating. Then international trade frauds. This is very common occurrence in international trade. So how to avoid that? So there could be some indications. You need to catch up those indication and make remedial measures. So those also we will look at it. Cybercrime, which is the trend now when you are doing everything online, uh, or everything more towards virtually, you prone to cybercrime, right? So what are the cybercrime? So let us see what are the, then intellectual property rights. Yeah, whatever the personal skill, everyone has it. So especially the people who have the talent, where they contribute their intellectual skills, then that need to be protected. So these are the objective. By end of the session, you know, you will be studying all these things, and how the risk, what are the risks involved, so in what way we could mitigate this risk, right? So why we are talking about risk when you compare the domestic trade, right? You can see the goods and services that are traded domestically, right? So we will be having risk, right? If somebody can, when you are taking the goods, when you are buying something from a seller, and when you take the goods to your warehouse, there could be accident take place, right? Even the domestic trade, that's possible, right? Sometimes you buy goods on a credit basis, you try not to pay as a buyer, you have taken a credit facility from the seller, then you are trying to default it, right? So this is a common occurrence in every trade. So the trade is something where these inherent risks cannot be eliminated, but could be mitigated or reduced. How? By adopting best practices. That is, you could see even a domestic trade has a lot of risk, right? So that there could be payment risk, there could be default risk, there could be damages to the goods, right? At which point, who is going to take the risk? Is it any third party involved in sharing that such risk? That is, we are referring to insurance, right? So that is where sharing comes in. Sharing means when somebody is losing financially, that need to be shared with the other party, which are insurance professionals, right? So they take the calculated risk by accepting certain premium. So you take insurance cover when the goods are moving from one location to other location, which are exposed to unexpected risk. As a result, there will be financial losses that could be covered by insurance. So these are all we are talking about domestic trade. But when it comes to international trade, uh, it's more complex, right? It's more complex. Uh, so you could see that the key factors in international trade can be categorized into uh, three, especially the trade transaction. Movement of goods, yes. Here the movement of goods is, it's not within the country. We are going to discuss it. These all international trade. So domestic trade, yes, little movement of goods taking place domestically, even that are exposed to risk if there is an accident or topple of a container, right? Where there is a slop on the road and the container couldn't control the vehicle, truck, it met with an accident. The container toppled. There's a risk. Movement of goods, movement of documents. Generally, movement of documents within domestic trade is very rare, but in international trade, movement of documents also one of the risk area. Movement of funds, yes. So you could see the movement of goods, movement of documents, movement of funds. So traditionally, banks have been playing key role in the movement of documents, because you could see you have now learned letter of credit, documentary collection. You have seen where the documents are channeled through bank to bank. So banks are involved in the movement of documents. So you know what are the payment terms. Letter of credit, yes. Documentary collection, under which we studied documents against payment, document against acceptance. So this is these terms, when traders are using this international payment method, the banks are getting involved in exchanging documents, right? So you can see banks comes in as exchanging documents. Not only that, banks also comes in as movement of funds. Yes, when it comes to movement of funds, you could see every payment terms, including advance payment and open account. Banks as comes in. So eventually, all the payment terms, as far as the payment terms are concerned, for all methods, LC, whether it's a documentary collection, whether it's open account, whether it's advance payment, banks comes in as a mover of the funds. So the movement of funds are taken through the banking channel, right? There's no other way. But obviously, there are other methods are followed in developed country, different method, but still traditionally movement of funds are taking place through the banking system. So the movement of documents and movement of funds, banks are getting involved. But remember, the movement of goods, generally bank do not involve, because they don't have these resources to get involved to ensure the movement of goods. So that part is predominantly lying with the traders, or the buyer and the seller, or the importer and the exporter, or any logistic player, people who are in the transport industry called logistic players. So these people are getting involved in the movement of goods. So this is where uh, you need to be ensure, as far as the exporter is concerned, and also take example of Sri Lankan exporter, tea exporter. When he hand over the consignment to the shipping company become a logistic player to move the goods from Colombo port to whatever the destination. So that you are trusting the logistic players to do that, right? That is where the movement of goods comes in. But banks comes in as a movement of documents and ensure you, if you are exporter, you get the payment. If you are importer, they will execute the payment, or they will remit the funds to the seller. So the banks comes in to facilitate the payment. Banks comes in to facilitate document, but banks do not get involved movement of goods. That as specialized people are there. So the buyer and seller has to make sure the movement of goods are done through the logistic people, like shipping company, freight forwarding company. So these are airlines. These are the people in professional in taking goods from one destination, or one, you may call it as a port of loading, to the port of destination, from the where the goods are loaded and where the goods are unloaded at the destination. So there are two. So there are two countries involved in international trade. That is where you got to understand, right, the difference. What is risk? Simple term. If you are making an investment, if you are unable to to recover part of it or the entire thing, it become a risk. uh, in international trade, what you are doing, it's kind of an investment, right? uh, you make some investment because you are exporting goods, mean your investment into your business. So that is your working capital, right? So you make working capital, or you have borrow. I think previous session we learned what are the type of borrowing available for the traders, right? So exporters has lot of borrowing facility, pre-shipment, post-shipment. So you borrow from others, and your working capital are contribute from this borrow fund, maybe part of combination of your own funds. So these are your investment, right? So when your investment is towards this exports, towards this exporting commodities, and if the buyer is unable to pay you, then there's a loss for you. That is where the risk is. The risk is where an investor had made the investment and is unable to recover his investment because the other party is not executing the payment as promised. Or it could be risk where it could be other way also, right? There are instances. Now the seller has taken the money in advance payment. Seller has taken the money, and seller is not performing. So it's a risk of buyer losing the money now. Buyer has already sent the payment, but the seller is not performing. So it could be non-performance also kind of a risk. So as a result, buyer at a risk. He lost the money. So the risk could be not only the seller, the both parties. This is where you need to understand in trade, it is not only one party who is the seller only losing money. No, in most of the time, even importer is mostly getting affected. So I think when it comes to letter of credit, I think we when we learn terms, I think we have already know what is letter of credit, right? So sometimes what happens if you go and open LC for a wrong person, and you open the LC, that wrong person misuse the LC by sending you inferior quality and claim it under the LC. Is fully covered. But as a buyer, you also should be aware before you open the LC, you also should know the counterparty whom you are dealing with, whether it's a reputed company, what is their track record, how long they have been in the business. So all these things need to be checked even prior to use open a letter of credit. So you know there are elements. It's not the seller who has who has the risk factor mostly affected to the seller. No, there are instances the buyers too getting affected or financially losing because of the seller's non-performance. So it's a both way combination of both is put together. You call trade risk, right? So you can see trade transactions are because goods are good must travel in the long distance. Yeah, international trade is a country to country. It's not a domestic. So goods need to be traveled from longer distance. So when it comes to longer distance, definitely you don't directly get involved. You will trusting the third party as a logistic people to come and assist you. So that is where the shipping company, freight forwarding company coming there. Pass through the custom barrier. Yeah, there are two customs involved: exporting country, importing country. So there will be custom clearance from export as well as imports. So when remember these every country will have their import export control through the customs. So we have Sri Lanka customs. Every export going through Sri Lanka by sea is going through the Sri Lanka custom, and there is a customs counter at airport. By whatever the air shipment, by things are going by air freight, it's checked at customs at airport. There's a custom. So you could see whatever the mode, whether it's a sea or air, there's a custom in every country. So whether it's export, there's a custom clearance. Whether there is an import, there's a custom. This is common in every country. But this is the department, this is the customs department only controlling the trade part of it. What is the goods coming into the country, what is the goods going out of the country, right? And they only giving permission or the importer to clear the goods or the exporter to export the goods. So the customs comes in. So that is passed through the custom barriers, right? Payment must often made in foreign currency. That is where you come to the bank, where the payments are converted and made. So if a Sri Lankan exporter doing a tea and he gets dollars. So if he doesn't have a dollar account, he might tell the bank to convert into rupee and putting into rupee account. So the banks comes in to convert his dollar into rupee. Or if you are an importer, you have only rupees. you need to pay the seller in foreign currency. So you will go to the bank asking the bank to convert your LKR into foreign currency. So that is a movement of funds. So you have LKR as an importer, but you need to pay the seller in foreign currency. So the banks comes in there. That is the reason banks come in, because banks makes the payment in foreign currency, not in the local currency. That is where banks come, because they are the authorized dealer to convert the own currency into foreign currency, or vice versa, foreign currency into local currency. So the banks comes in, right? So the what is the key successful to avoid this? No, you can't eliminate the risk, but you can have a risk management plan, a well executed risk management plan. uh, After understanding each key points, then you will arrive a good risk business management plan, right? That is what important. If you're having a risk management plan well executed, you will try to see whatever the higher risk that could that most probable to the trader could be avoided by taking, because you have a set of standard, right? You set a standard. When I am dealing with the other counterparty, there are certain things to be done. So the trader should not compromise that process. Remember, whether it's a reputed company or just a beginner emerging company, doesn't matter. You need to follow your processes. That is what you call risk management processes. You need to know, identify the potential risk. Whether you are importer, whether you are exporter, you need to identify the potential risk, meaning the counterparty. Say if you are importer, to whom are you buying from? You should know the background of the exporter, whether it's a reputed company, whether they have default, because you are sending money, you are sending advance payment, right? So you are sending money to the seller. So you should know the background of the seller. Or you may open LC through the bank. You put your money and open the LC to see something else coming. So you should know more about the seller as an importer, right? So your potential risk as an importer, knowing more about the seller. If you are an exporter, you should know more about the buyer, right? You could avoid asking the buyer to open the LC, right? So mostly the importers part of you as a seller, you can take by introducing a strict payment method, secure payment method, the payment risk could be avoided. But as a buyer, he is enforced, he is faced with lot of risk, unless otherwise he has to go through this risk management process carefully before execute the contract. So you need to know the other party. So every trade activity you must understand the fundamental to avoid the risk or to reduce the risk is understand the counterparty. You should, if you do not know the counterparty first time when you are dealing it, you must be highly precautious. You have to take maximum precautions. Whether if you are importer, you know who is the supplier. So if the supplier says or the exporter says send the advance payment, you should know whether he will remit the goods. Once you receive the money, whether he is, so you won't be able to go and check whatever internet website and check their website address and go and effecting payment. And he insists advance payment to be made. Yes, you can make the payment, but what is the study that you have made about the background of the seller? That is what the identify potential risk. Evaluate the risk. You need to evaluate your risk. Evaluate mean you, okay, if I am buying this particular person, what is my risk? At which point the price is taken? So whether it is a reputed company, whether they have any default cases reported. This is what your evaluation of risk. Because at end of the day, when you're making an advance payment, cover, you need to cover your risk, right? So that is what always, when an importer have been asked to send the money in advance payment, to cover that risk, you ask for a bank guarantee from the seller. That is what central bank says. If you are out of rupee account, when you are making an advance payment more than $50,000 or equivalent, you need to take an advance payment guarantee from the seller's bank. Why do you take that? Because you are sending more money. If the seller doesn't perform, then what happens? How do you recover? By taking a bank guarantee, you have other instrument to recover. That is what you take advance payment guarantee when you are remitting money. So remember, whenever you remit money in advance, thinking that particular seller, particular exporter will perform future, it's an assumption. But in reality, if he doesn't ship, what is your position? Whether you have taken a precaution. That is what called evaluation of risk, right? Select a risk management method. Okay, you select what type of management method I will be using. You will have the risk. There are so many various risk management methods, bank, company to company follow, country to country to follow, right? So you will have your own risk method. Okay, if this particular identified potential risk are identified and you have done a proper evaluation of risk, then you select the what is the method, risk management method. You probably you will, okay, you finalize it and say, okay, we will deal with this person under this condition. That is your risk management method, under which you will have, okay, if you are a seller, you might say the buyer has to open a listing, or if you are a buyer, you will ask the person, I will pay you when you send the goods on documentary collection. So you will, because your risk management method will allow you what type of payment method to be known, to be dealt with this particular case. Where if he, the counterparty is a fresh party or first time is dealing with. Implement the risk management program. Yes, once you have this identified, if you have a proper risk management plan, most of the unwanted risk could be avoided or minimized if not. So you have to ensure every time this risk management process is very effective. So we have seen some companies on an ad hoc basis, just because they don't have some resources, they go and deal with totally unknown people, and they will send the money also as advance payment. So as a bank, in some instances, we have asked the importer whether are you sure that whether you are dealing with this particular guy, you are sending $30,000. Then the response sometime uh, shows they don't have any risk management process. They just got it from the other co-trader. He only introduced this exporter. He is from Thailand or China, right? So you need to be extra cautious. Maybe they are doing with long-standing relationship, maybe other company. That relationship with you is totally different. You are the first time you are going to buy from somebody, and all of a sudden he insisted for your advance payment. You never know, because though some co of the other importer have been dealing with the same company, can introduce you the same supply to you, but this is your first time relationship. So if you have to go by your risk management plan. Sometime what happens, these people go by, uh, they don't have a risk management plans, most cases. If you have a risk management plan, you could see the possible risk could be avoided. And not only that, you can't compromise this plan and go out of the plan and do transaction with somebody. There, it's a risk, the high risk. So that is where sometime happens. Some people, they don't have exclusive risk management process as such, but they will take fundamental uh, elements are checked. Okay, whether it's a reputed company, who is their banker, is there any other local person has bought these goods, check with them whether this is the company. This is how you get information about the unknown counterparty in other country, right? So risk management method mean whether you want to avoid the risk, then what is the, or you want to reduce the risk. So either you want to avoid, means sometimes if you feel it's a highly risk, you may totally avoid. Avoid mean you are not doing the transaction. Sometimes there is a request, say Sri Lankan tea exporter, there is a request from Afghanistan tea buyer. So when you hear Afghanistan, then you know there is a problem in the country, whether he will pay, right? So Afghanistan is a high risk country. So first of all, you when you look at it, high risk country, then you have a reservation. Oh, high risk country person. You might politely say, sorry, I'm not in a position to supply at this moment. I don't have, or you diplomatically decline that request. That is risk avoidance. Totally avoid, because you know it's a counterparty, is highly risk, right? Risk reduction. So you intend to do that, but you will take precaution to reduce the risk. If assumption, then the risk assumption will come, because you make assumption, right? So if these things happen, what is mine? With whom I am sharing this? That is what insurance comes in. Risk sharing mean always you share the risk with the other counterparty, which is always insurance. So remember, in international trade, you can't do international trade without insurance, because insurance is important from the seller's warehouse to the buyer's warehouse. Just imagine, just take an example and think logically. An exporter in China warehouse, goods are coming to say Battaramulla warehouse of in buyer's warehouse in Battaramulla in Sri Lanka. Just think how many critical points are there. The seller's warehouse in outside Beijing, it has to come to all the way to Beijing port, right? So there is a roadway, goods are coming from the seller's warehouse. Say electrical bulbs or whatever decorative items come in a container outside the Beijing in China. So it all the way coming to Beijing ports. The goods are, the container is unloaded at the seaport at Beijing. Then again checked, custom check, everything done, then loaded into the vessel. So the things are loaded. So you can see the containers are moving. Then it is loaded into the vessel. Then all the way the vessel is doing its journey, marine journey. So it's moving. So different ports they are touching and come to Colombo port. And from there, the goods are unloaded from the shipment, from the vessel to the boat. Then the importer will be notified the goods have come, he has to go and clear it. Then what will happen? Those unloaded goods putting into his vehicle. Then the vehicle is coming through to Colombo Road and goes to the Battaramulla warehouse. Until the good reaches at Battaramulla warehouse safely, you can see the critical points. Yes, seller's warehouse outside Beijing, coming to all the way to Beijing, goods are moving here and there, loaded, unloaded, mean the container is taken and putting on the ground or whatever the board special area. From there, it will put into the vessel in China, Beijing. Then it's traveling. While it's traveling in the sea water, there are so many risks could happen. You have seen no so many vessels damaged while in transit. Yes, so many vessels. Storm can come, tsunami can come and damage the vessel. So it's a natural perils. All that risks are there. That is was the first photograph I showed you. Wherever possible risk. So you these are the risks that could be sharing. So you need to share the risk. So insurance is very important in international trade. No business is done without insurance. So remember, because basically you are giving the goods to the third party. It is not you that physically taking the goods and giving it to the buyer. No, you are giving it to a, a logistic player, maybe shipping company, maybe airlines, maybe freight forwarder, and they are taking custody of your goods and ensure that will be moving to one location to the other location. So during this process, so many things could happen. Even the once the goods are reaches in ports, again it's loaded and unloaded taking place. So the goods are moving. The movement of goods are frequently taking place, right? So that is where the risks are, right? So we are going to look at kind of a risk. What are the risks in international trade? So you can see, so there are a lot of risk involved, but we are only discussing more relevant, more considered as more key risk, right? So product risk, the product itself risk, right? Counterparty, which is the credit risk. Counterparty means the other party, trustworthiness of the other party. Political country, very important, where the country situation, where the political situation goes hand in hand. Environment, everything comes there. Cultural and ethical, each country will have their own culture, ethics. How that going to make a risk factor. Transportation, very important risk in international trade. Transportation risk, yes, that is where most damages are taking place. Foreign exchange, yes, movement of currencies, fluctuation of, now you can see dollar value, what is happening in Sri Lanka. The example of foreign exchange rate risk, right? We don't have foreign reserve. The dollar rates are going up, right? Legal risk, yes, there could be some legal risks, right? So there are patent rights you need to register. You are exporting somebody else's goods. You don't have any legal right to export. Those are legal risks, right? So the actual party who has the financial losses can sue, can take a legal action against the other party. Then that is called legal risk, right? Counterfeit goods, yeah, they are the willfully person who always send the inferior quality goods. Counterfeit goods mean bad quality goods. Counterfeit. Documentation risk, yeah, sometimes people fraud, do the documentation, they send their documents and goods are totally different, or send two set of documents for the same cargo. So this happens, these things are happening, that is what it comes as a risk, right? And international trade frauds, yeah, there are so many fraud taking place. So these are considered as major risk in international trade. So we will look at each and every risk, what risk factor we need to be aware of. Product risk, yes. So whether you are importer or exporter, you need to know the product, right? So whether there is, when you're ordering a particular commodity, you should know whether there is a demand for the product in the local market. You're importing from other country. Okay. So what is the competition? Whether any other body importing, whether government importing this particular commodity. So that is where you need to know the product knowledge. So the product itself is means, so that is totally within you, within the trader. So they can control this product risk. They know which product to be ordered at what time. Say, for example, if you are ordering decorative items in October, September, October, by the time November end, the shipments are arrived. So you have plenty of time to sell it, because mostly the December first week you need to display those goods and decorative items, Christmas decorative items comes in October. You place the order sometime June, July. You expecting the vessel to come in October end or now. You put it those into your warehouse and taking from November, end of November, you started selling to the outlets, right? That is the timing. That is the demand for the particular product. The seasonal, there are seasonal items. There are items which are regularly you have a demand, like electrical goods. You really require electrical, whether TV or laptops or whatever. There is a continuous demands are there, but there are certain commodity only demand comes due to the season. So depending on your season or whether it's a regular, you need to order the product. Pricing is very important. So everything depend what is cost to you, whether you have gone and bought it from very expensively, so you are unable to put it to the local market, you are losing because of the price. The price also very sensitive, because you need to order from a reputed company with the negotiation. Always remember, in international trade you need to have a negotiation skills. The people who do not have the negotiation skill always get caught to this wrong people. I mean, they go and buy things very expensive. By the time when they clear it, it's more expensive. Uh, then when they come to the market, their prices are a bit expensive. Then people do not buy that. It takes long time for them to sell those goods. It doesn't mean that they won't be able to sell. They will sell it, only the very limited people can afford to buy when the goods are very expensive. So the price also. Design packing, yes, very important. There are certain commodity attracted by the design and the way it's packaged. So you can see, when you go to example, when you go to if you take Dilma, they have a brand name. So brand name is well established. When you have a brand name, that 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 depicts the quality of the product. So with the product quality is there, definitely the brand, because of the brand only the product maintain a quality. So example, if you have a Dilma tea, you need not to do any extra advertisement. People know Dilma means Ceylon tea, very famous for Ceylon tea, Dilma. That is a brand. So that is also important. So you need to know about the brand and quality of your product. Compliance and regulation. Every country will have their compliance and regulation. Say any goods imported to Sri Lanka, there must be price control. There must be ingredient to be in the package. So whoever consumer go and check the particular commodity, all that ingredient used to make that final goods should be displayed in the pack itself. That is what we call uh, compliance and regulation. So every country will have. So what in especially medical item or cosmetic item, when you take it on the reverse of the pack, you can see all the ingredients are put. What percentage the ingredients are there, whether it is any natural, it is natural ingredients are used, any artificial ingredients are used. If so, what is the percentage? What is the sugar level if it is a edible item? So those are information required to be incorporated in each every package. So that is you should know. Sometime what happen, without knowing, you send some goods to some country that getting rejected. The buyer says, no, I can't sell it. I need to do the repacking. Now there is a delay in the process. Not that he's going to return the goods. He has to repack those goods because your packing doesn't meet the local requirement. So you need to communicate this to the it's a fault of the buyer not informing the seller prior to shipment. So when you are negotiating, you have to incorporate. That is what your risk management process. You need to say, when I'm buying goods, these are the local requirements. The goods should be packed. There should be price. There should be in the price, in the sense it's their price, right? So that is generally the local market will have their own pricing. So here the important ingredient, the way it's packed with the required information, there manufacture date, expiry date, ingredients, what is the percentage used, everything should be there. Because when you are given a license, you need to show it to the relevant local authority to get a license before you import a certain commodities, right? That should have this basic requirement. Inventories. So yeah, so the inventory also, you have to mindful when you get an order, you will have enough inventory stocks to supply to produce. Your inventory is also very important. So sometimes, let's say you have ordering 3-4 shipment, right? You have plenty of inventory. Whether you need to be aware whether you are going to place other order, because if you do not have the inventory properly done, then you will be losing, financially losing. Unwanted goods have been ordered and your inventory is very uh, uh, unlimited inventories you have, because there are certain inventories you have a limited expiry. So especially medical stuff, you need to be aware of your inventory stocks. So medical as a limited expiry date, cosmetic cream or whatever, when you're importing, that has a limited expiry, or some edible items, right? Reputation, yeah, reputation of the particular manufacturer of the product is very important. So these are the factors that you need to be. So if you know these are the product is associated with, what kind of a mitigating factor? Now each and every risk we have a mitigating factor. Possibly how this mitigating factor will allow you to eliminate certain risks or reduce the risk. So here the mitigating factor with regard to the product. So you need to assess what demand there is for the export product in the overseas targeted market. Yes, you need to be aware of when you're exporting. Say you are exporting tea to other countries. In UK, we are exporting tea, right? Then you should know there is a necessary for our tea. If so, what type of, whether it's a bag or flavored tea, because there are other exporters also exporting to tea from Kenya, African country exporting tea, India exporting tea. So there are competitors. So how can that be have a exhaustive market because of the product that you are exporting need to be catered to the segment, right? So you sometimes you need to modify, right? Sometimes they need the not the naturality, they need the flavor. So what you do, so sometimes when you don't have the flavor, we may import from China and mix it and send the flavor tea to the targeted market. So that is what you, because that the flavor tea are the demand in that particular market, in that particular country. So you need to adjust your commodity according to the targeted market requirement. And you need to aware of the competitors. Yes, Kenya exporting, India exporting, so you should keep an eye on what is this competitor, how they are doing their product. So you need to be aware of their product range. You need to visit their website and see, because that is important. That is part and parcel of the your business. So when you are exporting from, I think there are a lot of exporters doing extensively. They have a team deployed, go to the each website and see what is the advertising, how attractive the advertisements are, their websites are designed. So that is also part of it, part of the product. So for this product, they have advertised in such a way, everybody go to their website and see how they advertise, what are the features uh, deployed in each product list. So those are the things that you need to be involved, so that you are giving more information. So the more when you're giving updated information, the counterparties are aware. Okay, this is what this product you're going to give you. This is what this product has these features. Sometimes when you want to buy whatever laptop or whatever, what you do, you go and check in the online, right? You name the brand, the name, you go and check it. That information is there. So when you have more information, then you get a more clarity about the particular product. Likewise, when you go and check the particular product, it has all the specification, it has given all the pictures, it has done some comparison with the other product. That is where competitor comes in. So the if you go to Google, and if you want, because the Google is publishing the comparison, because this their website has the information, right? So your own website, whether you are importer or whether you exporter, especially seller, need to publish their product range, product portfolio information, so that the other people are aware, interested party will aware, right? Need to be aware any restriction that may exist in the target market. Yes, sometimes there are restrictions for importing goods. So if you take example, now Sri Lanka, where vehicle is restricted, prohibited until further notice. So there's no mobile, no vehicle industry looking at Sri Lankan market. They know Sri Lankan market is shut down. So the Indian manufacturer will not look at the Sri Lankan market. There is no demand. So they will look at any other market, because the market is currently stopped. The particular commodity is prohibited to import. So likewise, every country will have their own version. So the countries will have their local restrictions, right? So you need to be aware whether I have the market, whether I don't have the market. Now see, the Indian car manufacturers are complaining through their uh, ministerial level. Talk to Sri Lanka and see why they are not buying our vehicles, because they manufacture fleet of vehicles, because they are market about 30-40% of our vehicles are from India. By call this vehicle. None of this is coming for more than 1.5, 2 years now. I think by March, so they lost the market. So those manufacturers will also be financially losing their market. So that is where the product, there is no demand. The great demand is there, but the local regulation doesn't permit vehicle to come at this moment to Sri Lanka. So that is an example. You can take example. Likewise, every country will stop it. Sometimes I think in the inception, what happened when we are buying this vaccination, the you can see the coronavirus inception when you are buying vaccination. India stopped it immediately. That is why we couldn't buy AstraZeneca. Why? Because they want the local production locally. It was There's a high demand for the local consumption, because it was spreaded. The viruses got spreaded vastly in India. It's a mass, at a mass level, the highly populated country, right? So they stopped exports. They only cater to the domestic market. So these are the changes the government will take, right? So when the changes are taking place, you should be aware of the changes, right? Then we have to look for other alternative to buy if the essential, if that particular item is an essential item. That is how we looked into other vaccination to import, right? So those are example I'm giving you so that you have better understanding. Make sure the packing labeling, that is very important. What information specific regulation says, expiry date should be there, manufacture date should be there, because certain countries do not consume certain ingredients, because that is totally banned, right? So if the ingredients is incorporated into the particular commodity, then you can't. That is what, before you bring any commodity, you have to get a sample and send it to the local authority, get their clearance before. Especially medical item, you can't import without the clearance of the relevant authority, local authority. You have to get the clearance, because they go through the ingredients of each medical item, whether that particular item is allowed to use, whether the doctor's recommendation is there, whether MOH clearance is there. So all that is required with regard to the product. Yeah, when you are transporting labels, packing, which will be definitely country to country, the requirements are vary. You need to be aware of what is should be there, what should in this particular requirement, what is there as exporter or as importer, you should know, right? So this is one type of risk. Now we are looking at the counterparty risk, which is key risk, which is the most important risk. The counterparty mean, if you are a seller, you are worry about the buyer, whether he will make the payment. That is what counterparty risk all about, right? Counterparty is all about the other party. If you are an importer, you worry about the exporter, whether he will do the performance. If you are exporter, you worry about the importer, whether he will make the payment. This is the counterparty risk. So counterparty is generally what happened about the payment. So whether the importer will default the payment. So exporter, that is what exporter said, okay, I don't deal with anybody, you send the advance payment. Or a exporter might say, I will sell you the goods, you open LC. Now exporter covering himself by introducing the appropriate payment method to cover the exposure of the risk aligning or is coming from the payment risk. So you use the secure payment method, right? So default of payment obligation, delay in making financial commitment. There could be delay. You send the documents on acceptance. He has cleared the goods, but he's not making the payment. There is a delay. So you need to be aware of. So the counterparty whom you are dealing with is very important when it comes to country risk, right? There is an increased risk of non-payment, late payment, or outright fraud. Sometimes what happens when you are exporting to Bangladesh and all, they don't pay bill on time. They take the banks and the people buyers take their own time. I think now the Bangladesh is little, they are refined now. They are, I mean, now it gradually with their GDP improving, the economy is improving. Now they are little better. If you take 10 years ago when you're exporting something to Bangladesh, you always enforce or foresee a delay in getting the payment. Obviously, even LC they don't pay on time. So that is where the counterparty risk comes in. So this country has a problem in getting the payment down, right? And there are also misunderstanding which will lead to refusal of payment. So you, when you are having a misunderstanding, generally it comes with a counterparty, especially when you are using Incoterms. Mostly misunderstanding come when you are using Incoterms, right? Sometimes people do not know the payment method also, right? So remember, though you study everything, when you talk to the trader also should understand the terminology what you're talking. Otherwise, without their knowledge, they go and for the sake of making profit, you go and import or export without this knowledge. You expose yourself to face any number of risks because you don't know the background of this knowledge. You need to possess all this. If you're a trader, whether you importer or exporter, right, you need to possess adequate knowledge in order to have a smooth sailing. Otherwise, you will engulf to unwanted issues, right? So you need the people need to understand, right? The location of the counterparty, reputation, yeah, the relationship is matters. That's what I told. Especially counterparty comes the relationship to whom I dealing. So when you are buying something from an exporter, it's better that you go and make a visit if you're a regular, say a pharmaceutical. We are buying a Sri Lankan pharmaceutical companies buying medicine from India in Chennai. It is always better the government or the private company locally buying medicine in Sri Lanka to personally visit to the Indian company and see how they are warehouse, what are they doing, how is the process done, are they using a good ethics, right? All that is important, right? Then when you have that relationship, they will also come to Sri Lanka and meet you to see how their products are moving, whether they have a demand for their product, whether they can find some more buyers in Sri Lanka. This is where the relationship is built up. When you are personally meeting each others, there is a good relationship. When you're having a good relationship, the counterparty risk is become very less. When the gap is increasing only, the counterparty risk is probable. When the gap is narrowing down, right? There is no hardly any gap. Then the counterparty risk is very much eliminated because you have better understanding. Because we learn the payment terms. Why per person who has been insisting payment seller insisting on LC payment? Why you switch on to DP? Why you switch on to DA? You studied, right? Say I'm exporting tea to somebody in UK, some supermarket in UK. I insisted export LC to be open. Then only I export the tea. So I because I didn't know about him. Then he visited me. I visited to him. Right now we have a good relationship. Now I'm switching on from LC to DP. I'm taking a risk because I know that guy. he said, no, ship me the goods, I will pay and collect, because I can't open the LC and dumping my money and wasting my money. Working capital I have limited. So can you ship it on DP? Now see, you send it on DP terms. Documents again. He will pay and clear it. Now he's asking, after the relationship further strengthened, he's asking now, can you send me the goods on 90 days credit period? Right? This is the relationship. So you are now willing to send it on 90 days on DA terms, document again accepted. So the UK buyer buying tea from you is going to pay after 30 days, after 60 days, or after 90 days. Right? That credit period depend on the relationship you have with that particular buyer. So if the buyer is known to you, and you have been dealing with the buyer for so long, the trust is there. So you switch on to DA terms. This is how the counterparty risk could be avoided. So how do you mitigating factor? Yes, the number one, knowing your customer and his business is the key. If you know the first one, then most of the issues are sorted. If the relationship is there, then there's hardly anything, because the relationship matters, right? Uh, so how do you do that? You when you are doing with a person, you know whether he's making the payment, or if you're first time trying to do some checkup of do some checkup on the buyers, whether he is good, whether he is into business, how long. Do some research on the customer, because in the risk management we saw there is, you do some credit analysis, right? Do the research on this, establish good relationship with the counterparty, very important. Follow up on the existing client, yes. Using suitable secured payment method, yes, such as LC. If you're a seller, if you're trying to deal with unknown person, you always insist for the LC. Or if you feel that it's still LC is not the mechanism, you insist for the advance payment. If there is no choice, the buyer will adhere to your request and he will send the payment in advance. AP stand for advance payment, right? LCO advance payment, right? AP stand for advance payment. So usage of security device such as SBLC bank guarantee. I think that is also one of the good way to do. Say, you ask somebody to open LC, right? Uh, right. So let's say a Sri Lankan tea exporter exporting tea to, let's say, Indonesia. They're buying tea from us. Now the Indonesian person is opening the LC, right? So the Indonesian person opening the LC, uh, you are exporting tea. But the Indonesian person, after opening the LC, he feel the Sri Lankan tea exporter might send inferior quality. So he wanted, though the LC is opened by him, he want to take other cover, extra cover. So he might tell the tea export in Sri Lanka to, can you issue me a standby letter of credit, SBLC, or performance guarantee. I want a performance guarantee. Why? Because he feel after opening the LC, if a Sri Lankan person uh, doesn't send the required tea quality, if he send the inferior quality, he has to make the payment, because LCs are dealing with documents, right? So he's losing. By opening the LC, he has committed, his bank is committed to pay. Now, Sri Lankan tea, assuming the Sri Lankan tea exporter, if he send the inferior quality tea, he's going to lose. So by opening the LC, still he feel there's a risk. So he might cover that risk by asking the exporter to give a bank guarantee to cover, because he opened the LC. Now he's asking the exporter, you better give me a bank guarantee, because you wanted LC, I opened the LC. But I don't know whether what stuff you send. But in the event after I clear that, if I see there's inferior quality, I want a bank guarantee to cover my loss. So there are best way to do that, right? That is how you use the SBLC. Even Sri Lankan, say, take example, if we are importing something from China, right? Let's say we are importing something from China, some commodity, right? The Chinese seller says for us to open LC. Now we open the LC, but we never know whether the Chinese supplier will send the same good what we discussed. He must send some inferior quality and claim it under LC. Then you are losing. There's no way you have to separately take him for the court and take a legal action against the person. But if you don't know anything about the seller, though you have been opening LC through your bank, you are exposing a risk here. So you better cover the risk by asking that person to give a bank guarantee. So simple, in essence, what is happening? You are buying something from China, right? The Chinese seller asking the Sri Lankan buyers to open LC because he doesn't know the buyer. is not trusting, the buyer is going to open the LC. But on the other hand, after opening the LC, buyer now saying, I want a bank guarantee from you. So he might refuse or he might give. If he refuses, then you don't have any other choice, because there is no way that he will adhere to your request. So there are way to negotiate, right? So these are what we are saying is these are devices available to cover your risk. It is up to the capability of the trader to negotiate and incorporate it into the transaction. The contract is important, right? That is, but tools are available. These are some of the devices. SBLC, bank guarantee is a performer. I think bank guarantee we studied, right? So you know, bank guarantee is a separate way to cover the exposure. Credit insurance policy, yeah, you cover the export credit insurance policy. If something happen, there is export insurance policies there for you to cover the risk as exporter, right? So here we are learning both import export. These are common, right? So based on your whether you are exporter importer, the risk will apply. Obtain status report. Always remember, if you are doing a transaction with unknown party, always better to check the report. Status report means there is a company, I think in Sri Lanka, I think this particular Dun and Bradstreet, they have certain agreement with some local banks, right? So there could be other service provider, but I know Dun and Bradstreet is giving some status report facility to some of the banks in Sri Lanka. So if one of our exporting T2, let's say a country like Lebanon, right? So our exporter want to know about the Lebanon party, the Lebanon company, whether they will pay, whether what is their standing. So they might request a status report from this company, this outsourced company, Dun and Bradstreet. They will be charging maybe 100 to $150. The charges are ranging from US dollar 100 to 150. So you get a status report. It's an independent company giving a status report of the different people, different business entity. So they collect the first-hand information from Lebanon sources. They have their chamber of commerce in. So likewise in Sri Lankan people who are involving in exports, who are involving in imports, their registered names are there with the EDB chamber of commerce. Your names are there. Customs, your names are there. The customs will publish the blacklist company, blacklist person. So they have this data. So they share this data with these companies, and the company will have a database, central database. So they will give you the information. So whenever you want to check a particular entity, you can approach Dun and Bradstreet, give the company details, name and address. They will assist you to give a report. So looking at the report, you know whether the independent company will giving that information, whether the information about the company is good or bad, whether you are satisfied with the information given by the outsourced company called Dun and Bradstreet about the counterpart. So this is the way you mitigate the risk, right? This is the logo of Dun and Bradstreet. Yeah. So if you can see internet, you can. This is their logo. The company is called Dun and Bradstreet, right? Okay. So we now learn two risks, right? So the product risk and the country risk and the credit risk. Now we are moving on to the country risk. Yes, this is political, this is economical, environment, all that is combination, right? This is very, very difficult. Uh, this is a very, very important, but in the same time, uh, very difficult to foresee. Anything can happen to any country, right? Now, who have forecasted Sri Lankan uh, open LCs and Sri Lanka is not making the payment to the LCs that they open? Have anybody forecasted? No, but it had happened. If you take last year, we have opened some of the LCs, and the regulation came and said, don't make the payment, don't make the side payment, make a 90 days period, right? So these are you call country risk. The country regulation can supersede some of the regulation, right? So that is because they have taken a decision based on the economic situation. Uh, Imports need to be curtailed. I think if you look at the Sri Lankan context, about in 2000, uh, 2000 they are taken 2000 to 2001, 2020 to 2021 they are taken 2021. They are taken a lot of restrictions because they have seen foreign reserves are getting smaller and smaller. So they curtail all the import. That's what I said. Vehicle import have been stopping more than 2 years. By March, it's 20 March is stopped now. 22 March going to come. Maybe the next month time it reaches 2 years. We don't have single vehicle to be imported. That is one of the restrictions. Then they have bought certain commodities can be imported provided the supplier give 90 days credit period. But we have gone and opened a LC on site basis. So the supplier has already shipped the goods. Now we are going back and saying, look here, we open the LC. Opening LC is irrevocable undertaking, right? So when you open irrevocable undertaking, how can you go back and tell the supplier, no, according to our country regulation, we won't be paying you immediately. We will be compelled to pay you after 90 days period. So what happened? The credibility of our letter of credit in the international market is what happened. There is a question mark. In certain countries, they stopped accepting our LCs because we are going back our world. It's a irrevocable undertaking. When you give irrevocable undertaking by opening LC, you are committed to pay. You need to pay, right? But what happens? Due to the local regulation structured in such a way, a local bank couldn't make the payment. The import export control put restriction. Central bank comes and puts certain restrictions. As a result, the local bank couldn't make the payment under the LCs. So what happened? The suppliers are not happy the way the decision have been taken. So that is country risk. So you need to be aware of country risk. There can be countries can put overnight certain restriction. As a result, as a counterparty, you got affected. Whether you are buying from that country or whether you are selling to that particular country, the country risk is more relevant to you because you are dealing with a particular counterparty in the country, right? So there are country risk, right? So the country could be, right, the Syria, Iran, and all, because they had been placed sanction because there had been continuous war, continuous uh, conflict, right? And they are violating international regulations. So what happened as a result? They have been put by with the UN or USA. They have been affects. They put a sanction on these countries. So when they have put a sanction, then you can't deal with the country. That is become a country risk. I mean, Sri Lanka. If you take history, Sri Lanka have been exporting tea to Syria. Iran is our major buyer of tea. Both countries are now under sanction list. So we don't have the way to send, but there are other way. Still, we are sending tea. They did not directly to Iran and Syria. It maybe go from Middle Eastern countries, going different way and goes reaches. But there's no direct shipment we can do. It become a violation, right? So you need to be aware of, right? So these country risk is very very important in international trade because country can bring an import restriction, or maybe they can bring export restriction. Take example, India stopped uh, sending vaccination to other countries because of the domestic requirement. So they give the priority to the domestic consumption. So that immediately change. Though you place order, you are unable to get it because the domestic law supersedes the international trade transaction. So the law supersedes, right? So you need to be careful of that, right? So why the country taking such a decision? Because based on the policies, based on the economic situation, maybe politically they are compelled to take certain decision, right? So I think if you look at the country risk, I think classic example is what is happening to Sri Lanka now. Could be classic example of country risk. So the most of the people who are dealing with Sri Lanka are now afraid of doing it. Uh, in the sense, there are certain things. It doesn't mean so. Sometimes there have been more detrimental information have been given to the overseas people. Then the ground situation maybe not as the actual the way the detrimental information gone into the counterparties, because if you really look at it, the financial obligation we are meeting, right? But there are a lot of expectation, more to do, right? But having said and that, our economy policy need to be uh, consistent. So when you're having inconsistent economy policy, also you get into problem, right? So that is also we have seen some evidences uh, that is lacking, right? As a result, there are certain goods we couldn't import. We don't have foreign reserves. There are import-export control of bringing restrictions, and people are not allowed to send money. People are only allowed to send money for current transaction, where earlier people can send money out of their foreign currency for any purposes that have been stopped by central bank, because that is because what happened when when you don't have enough foreign reserves, you need to bring the restrictions. So on the regulators perspective, the remedial measures need to be taken, otherwise the economy will definitely will collapse, right? So they are taking a precautionary measures, right? So you need to balance the international community and how the economic situation uh, actually a real situation, ground situation in Sri Lanka. So you need. So we are getting calls from other countries, other banks. What is happening to your country? Why our exporters are complaining? They exported the goods, now your banks are not making the payment, or they are waiting local, because what happens now, each banks here in Sri Lanka, every banks uh, do not have enough foreign reserves to make the import bill payment. Bigger banks are getting the inflows and they're matching the inflows to outflow, because we don't have foreign reserve. Central bank do not have enough foreign reserve to support. They support what is essential, because now the level has come. It's only the essential goods that could be imported. So you need to be aware of the situation is such. Yeah, you can also see why we went into this situation, because if you really look at it, the tourism we are getting about $4 to $5 billion. That is zero now, right? And the worker remittances also, there is an issue. We are getting a lesser worker remittances coming through the banking channel. The people feel that uh, the when you are getting the banking channel, you have been paid 200 rupees and 10 rupees additional being paid. But when you are getting through the black market, you are getting more. So that is also other issue. We need to, on a long term, central bank also try to rectify this, because they stopped set people to sending the money through the other unofficial channels, rather than sending the money through the official channels so that people get paid. But what happens, the worker who have been aware of the market situation, so they feel locally, when they are paid for 240 rupees per dollar, why should they get 210 rupees by the local bank? So we send it to the other official unofficial channel they are trying to channel, but whereas uh, the local regulator says no, it has to come through the banking channel to support the economy. The fair call, but then we need to balance both side and compromise and come to a specific level. Otherwise, the inward remittances coming as a worker remittances also will might get impacted. Because already we don't get the tourism. Now tourism are gradually picking it up. So you can see there are billions of dollars that comes as a annual income to the country as a foreign inflow have been stopped. Then what is the alternative? You reduce the imports, right? So let's say you are getting 5 rupee, 100 rupee income to you, right? That 100 rupee income, then you spend about 100 or 105, or within 100 rupees you have been spending, for example, right? So when your 100 is become now 50, what is the other option? You reduce your unwanted expenses, otherwise you can't survive. That is what exactly happened. So when you get 100, you have been spending. The moment now the 100 become 50 or 40, 60 down now. 60 rupees is gone. Now, how are you going to manage with the 40 income? 40 rupee only you are getting it. So you only do the essential goods only you purchase. All your other things you will postpone. So that is what happened when a country doesn't have foreign reserve. These things could happen, right? So this is where we're looking at, right? So how do you, what should be the mitigating factor? Yeah, if it is a high risk country, they will avoid. So that is what sometimes you see some people do not dealing with Sri Lanka, because they feel no, this is not the time that we will sending anything to Sri Lanka. So that is also happening. But on the other hand, if we feel as export, we are exporting to country, if a country getting into problem like Pakistan, Afghanistan. Country has a lot of Myanmar, a lot of issues, right? Lebanon. So we also may, as exporter, might refrain from this market. If the country is high risk country, as a seller, it is not we. It is you have to look at both way, import export both way. So we are talking about import. Yeah, we are getting affected because the foreign sellers has some issue with our country. But look at the other way. How people are exporting. So our people are exporting means the buyers are there to buy. But our people need to be aware of because which country they need to refrain from. Because there are countries which are they have been ranked as a high risk countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, right, Myanmar, Lebanon. These are high risk countries. Syria, all these are some of them even sanctioned countries. So you can't even deal, right? So you need to be aware of relationship with multiple vendors. So yeah, same. Sometimes what happen if the vendor you need to have a multiple vendor same product, so you are exporting a particular way of say tea. So if Saudi you lose the market, then go to Bahrain or go to Kuwait, go to Qatar. So you should have a same product, multiple vendors. Or if you are buying certain goods from China and India, and you can import. If you are buying from Europe, the Europe might say Sri Lanka, we are not importing, we are not exporting to Europe to Sri Lanka. Say one of the German steel exporter saying, no, we don't sell anything to Sri Lanka. We are stopped. But if you have an alternative vendor to buy the same commodity at a little cheaper price at India or Sri Lanka, they might support. India or China, they might support us. If it is imports, if it is exports, so we need to be aware of uh, uh, to have an alternative market in the event somebody's preventing dealing, you should have an alternative market. Yeah, try as much because what happened when you are unable to import for the raw material for certain export commodity, try to use the locally produced resources. That is the best option. But unfortunately, we don't have immediate resources available to capitalize on this. So to have a contingency plan dealing with unexpected political risk, yeah, you need to study well, or may if a politically if a particular country is into problem, so you know what is happened to Myanmar recently. They took over the government. The official prime minister has been put into behind the bar. So these are things that Lebanon also got into financial crisis. So you need to aware of this market, right? So mitigating factor, maybe you need to avoid this country, or if you are taking a risk, you need to take the calculated risk, right? And take the export credit insurance in the event there is a payment delay. Take insurance policy to share the loss with somebody. Always there is a provision to make somebody else's accountable in the event if you are losing financially, right? Yeah, balance of payment improving because every country is looking for the export income to be increased and the import cost to be reduced. Every country. If you take USA, if you take China, if you take India, these are bigger economy. If you take top 10 bigger economy, these countries are there: India, UK, China, Japan, right? These countries are bigger economy. So they always focus more inflow of foreign exchange than the outflow. Then only they can improve their foreign reserves. So if you are getting $10 billion and your expenditure is only $6 billion, $4 billion your foreign reserves is plus. That is where these developed countries, we are just referring, these are trillion economy, right? Trillion economy. That means 1,000 billion is 1 trillion. So, like India, trillion economy, USA, trillion economy, Japan, trillion, China, trillion, right? Even Canada, USA, UK, all are trillion. Germany, all these are trillion economy. France, these are bigger economy, right? Trillion economy countries. So they need to ensure that as a developing country, countries like us, we have economy about 85 to 90 billion dollars, small economy, smaller GDP, but still need to be. We are struggling through because of the foreign reserves. So the ultimate purpose is to we need to improve our revenue by goods or services so that you will reduce the import substitution or import substitution if possible. So I think you can see you have seen some substitution locally. You manufacture certain agricultural commodity. If possible, that's the best option. uh, Local company, yeah, you make a joint venture, Alliance is local company. So, sometimes what happen, uh, when you are making a joint venture with counterparties, and so now see, for example, in Sri Lanka, if you take IOC, Indian Oil Company came as a joint venture with Sri Lankan Petroleum. So with the joint venture, there are benefit, mostly benefit to the country, they feel. But on the other side, uh, uh, there's no monopoly. There are two people are into the market. So you should not allow monopoly to happen. Now you know what happened to the Shell gas, the Laugh gas came. So Shell and Laugh, when they both together, uh, there had been a competition. Now I think both management is supposed to be the same management. But this is what happened when you have a joint venture with a leading player, and there will be competition. So when the competition prevails, the benefit goes to the ultimate consumer. Uh, yeah, consultation with the government and political leader. Because when you are having issue, you always when a country, suppose say we exported some tea to Pakistan. Now Pakistan importer is not making the payment. So what is the next step? You need to take it to the ministerial level. Their trade minister and our trade minister will communicate to their trade minister, or maybe Sri Lankan High Commissioner is there in Pakistan, or the affected the exporter might go to the Pakistan embassy in Sri Lanka and make a complaint, and that complaint can be sent to their government chamber, and they will look into that and they will respond it through Sri Lankan High Commission in Pakistan. So this is where the politically when these setups are there. So High Commission, Chamber of Commerce, these people meeting together to discuss. Sometimes you will see when our president or prime minister goes to some other country, they might take a delegation of team and go, because when they deal with when they're talking with the top people in the country, there are other group of people down the line. They talk each other's having problems. So they might go and list of people. They will say these are the Pakistani buyers not paid, and the Pakistan embassy come and says these are the Sri Lankan buyers who have not made payment, or these are the Sri Lankan exporters and the inferior quality goods, or Sri Lankan might have these are the list of Pakistan sellers and the inferior quality to us. There are issues, not always the issue. There are one-off incident this could happen, right? So this could be discussed among the politically the government level to reduce this, right? Yeah, you do the due diligence, ongoing research. Uh, so uh, those are the mitigating factors, right? So you need to be aware of when you are dealing with country's political risk. It is at a high level, so you need to aware. You don't have independently. You can go and challenge with anybody. You need to go through certain protocol. You need to go through certain, say, Chamber of Commerce or National Chamber of Commerce, or if it is export, EDB will support you. If you are exporter getting affected with the one country, they are not making the payment, right? So likewise, or if our importer sales are not taken by the other country, maybe our trade minister can talk to that country and asking them to accept it. Our country is okay now. We don't have foreign reserve issues, something to that nature will take place, right? So that is where these mitigating factors will uh, iron out the issue. Right now, the other is cultural and ethical risk. What is cultural ethical? This is all about the different countries will have the different set of ethical culture, belief, value system, right? Their history, priorities, right? They are they talk different languages, their customs. So if you take now example, if you take Japan, their culture is quite different. They have the traditional, and they have the ultra modernized. The bend, the both is combination of traditional ultra modernization culture in Japan. If you take US, is totally westernized. China is also towards little traditionals. They are more towards coloring and music, and they more towards this animal. Their calendars and all, the animal they give a priority. That is the tradition. So India is more cultural. Indian culture is quite different, more towards religious. So each countries will have their own cultural background, right? So even even that also would be mindful if you are a trader. uh, so if you're having a different business culture, right, so you need to be aware of even the cultures. So if you're meeting a Japanese person, the way the greeting Japanese person is different from Chinese, right, or different from Western or European people. So that is their culture. So you need to respect their culture. That is what the cultural become. If you are unable to failing to understand how the culture of the other country happens, then you will not have a better relationship, because you need to respect their value system, and reciprocally they should value your values. So this is what Japanese are considered as, and the highest standard. They are the top ranking, because their moral system and etiquette, when it comes to Japan, it's a very high level comparison to China. So the Japanese culture, their moral, and and they have the good behavior, good manners. Japanese comparison to China, it's lacking in that, right? So even if you talk to Japanese and Chinese, you can see the difference. How disciplined, how methodical they are, Japanese, right? So that is, should know. So you can't expect the same discipline, ethical from Chinese. So you need to understand they are coming from different culture, different environment. So that is where that also makes the relationship better, put it in better situation, or you will have a break in that relationship. So if you understand the culture better, then this kind of a failing to understand their value system, what kind of cultures adopted in their country, right? Some item maybe we 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 may be using certain colors. So sometimes they don't prefer to use the colors, right? So they like plain colors, right? So country have a different system. So accordingly, you target their market. So sometimes you need to do your repacking. Whatever you put into domestic market may not be the same way you send it to the particular country as export commodity, because the culture is different. The buyer's request from that country comes to you very surprisingly. The packing should be done this way. So that is their culture. So you must respect to culture. Otherwise, culture will also become an issue if you do not respect the others. So this culture and ethical is understanding each one's the practices, best practices, traditional they follow. Now, if you look at New Year, Chinese New Year start from 1st February till go to 1 month. Their New Year is totally different. The way they celebrate, every shops, everything is closed in first week. So you can't go and fight with Chinese person. Look here, I send you the goods. I couldn't answer you. No fax message, no confirmation, because the holiday they don't do anything. That is their culture. Likewise, when it comes to April, we have our New Year. So we will close for 3 4 days. A foreign party, counterparty has to respect that. That is what all the cultural. So if you respect the cultural, you will have a smooth sailing. And if you are disputing because of the cultural difference, then you will have an issue. So that is where the cultural talks about. Yeah, possibly. So you need to train to understand the business ethic, and give due respect to the each culture. By doing that, you will build up the relationship. Once the relationship is well established, you will have a build good culture integrity. Yeah. So integrity is something where you respect each other, and best practices you follow, focus on the values, whether it's a big or small. Values are, you might consider certain values. If you talk to Japanese, uh, their value system totally different, right? Even minute things, they will pay attention, right? They don't talk to people, uh, they talk to people very politely. They expect same thing from the others also. That is their culture, right? So sometimes if you talk to European and Western people in USA, their culture is quite different. So it's a gap. There's a big gap between these two culture. So you need to compromise yourself when you are dealing with due respect. But in the same way, Even a Japanese person should understand the Western culture, and they also should respect according to Western culture. It doesn't mean that you say, no, this is not agree with our culture, therefore we can't do. No, that is not the way when you're doing international business. You need to respect each culture. Uh, and if you're unable to understand each culture, there could be interpreter, there could be translator. Sometimes so there are certain documents, it's in only in Japanese language or only in Chinese language. But you don't know what is it said in that particular document. So you need to get the official translator to see what is stated, because that particular document only issued in their own language, Mandarin, the Chinese or Japanese language. So you're unable to understand. You need to get the translator to translate into English for you to understand what is said in that particular message or notice or whatever it is. Right? So you need to be aware of getting the assistance from the official translator or interpreter to consider what is the said message contain of. Right? Uh, yeah. So you do this process very frequently, then most of you respect each other's values. So that is what so this is the the ethics and the culture also become important in international trade. Yeah, this is where the most damages, you could see the picture shows, the picture talks the damages, transportation risk. This is again very important. uh, the goods don't arrive at all. Yes, yes. You look at the way the goods, right? What happened to the container that came and stuck in here in Sri Lanka, right? You know that, right? The vessel got into Sri Lanka problems, right? The entire container is gone, right? How many containers went, and we have that particular vessel devastated our resources, right? Lives, fish, tortoise, all those animals were killed in that incident, right? We couldn't control the burning. The entire ship got burned, and whatever the residual things got into the deep sea water. So that is the destruction. So that is involved in transportation. So goods don't arrive at all. See that container that I've been taking, how many containers got burnt in Sri Lanka? All that's chemical stuffs and other stuff. The buyers looking for a container, but it never reached them. Sometime reach them with damage or reach them late. So these affect the supply chain. Yeah, definitely disruption of supply chain. Now, suppose say when you are importing some chemical for our fertilizer, the chemical vessel, the vessel that comes with a fertilizer met with an accident. So we are looking for badly the fertilizer that didn't come. As a result, what will happen? You can see the vicious cycle. Now there's a stoppage. So the supply chain got affected. So we don't have any other alternative to use it. So this could happen. Suppose say our export has a garment order. So import a fabric, but the vessel that taking the fabric and coming got burnt entire thing. Now our people do not have fabric to do the export because there is a deadline to exports. So we are dependent on certain raw material to do the textile exports. So the raw material is fabric, thread, buttons coming from various places. Our entire vessel got burned. Now we are unable to execute order. The supply chain got affected because of this vessel got burned. These are natural perils. So these things could happen uh, uh, due to unavoidable circumstances, right? So this is a great risk. Contamination. See, so sometimes you can see there's a damage, accident. There could be people could come and attack, vandalism, right? They damage the public and private property. Terrorism can affect, right? So you can see recently a ship, I think a boat came from India to Colombo in our sea water to catch the fish. So what happened? Our ship, our northern fishermen got together, surrounded the boat, and then it was uh, taken custody by the Sri Lanka Navy, and then we got hold of these people. So these things could happen in This is just a vessel coming in for catching fish. But when it comes to commodity transportation, this thing, even piracy also there. I think that we will separately discuss. Even Somalia and all, what happened? Trace. Trace mean there is a narrow path, two different seas could merging. So, like Somalia and Nigeria and some of the Chinese countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, also you have these vessels have been intercepted by these people, pirates, and they try to take the containers goods forcefully, right? So that is the risk in transportation, because the moment the exporter give the commodity to the shipping company undertaken that they will take the container and go and giving it to the importer's country or port of discharge or port of destination. But unfortunately, these things are never reached there because of the transportation risk, right? So, what are the mitigating factors? So the mitigating factor could be what? Definitely insurance. Yeah, most appropriate form of transport. Yes, you select the most appropriate transport, but this accident cannot be avoided. Uh, so you need to have proper country. In the event of losses, what would be the contract of carriage says? What is the compensation will be paid? Accordingly, you have to take the insurance, right? Conduct proper packaging. Sometimes you need to do the packaging shipment also properly so that it will refrain from getting fire immediately. Sometimes you put it everything in the container. So the once the container full of loads are there, then the damages of goods can be minimized. But if it is an open space, I mean loaded, just a uh, lesser than container, will have be exposed to fire and all immediately. So it's better with the container ship putting into the container is much safer than any other method, right? Uh, Packaging shipment also important. Exercise extreme care, and especially when it comes to insurance. Remember, is always, as I told you, seller's warehouse to buyer's warehouse. That is the best way to take the insurance cover. In international risk, remember this is the very very important, taking insurance from the seller's warehouse to buyer's warehouse. If you miss out, as I told you, there are so many critical points by the way you are passing. The goods are taken custody from the logistic player or the freight forwarder shipping company, and they have ensured the goods will be reached to the port of destination. But each point, the goods are moved, goods are loaded, unloaded, right? So you can see, and the different modes are used, and the roadway, seaway, railway, again roadway. So there could be plenty of opportunity exposed to various risks. So the best way to cover this risk by taking insurance from point to point, from seller's warehouse to buyer's warehouse. Point to point, you need to take the insurance, right? When you take the insurance, there is something called institute cover. So that is insurance cover that you, this is how you call, sorry, uh, Institute Cargo Clause A. So that is ICC stand for. Institute Cargo Clause A cover the entire risk, right? So so I have given something here. If you look at Institute Marine Cargo Clauses has three sets of clauses. A clause is the most uh, preferred way of taking insurance. That covers the entire risk. Exceptionals are there, war, civil war. By nature, the goods commodity, the way the goods are packing are exposed to risk. Those will not cover. War, strike, right? Willfully defaulted. Those things will not cover. But other than that, generally all the risks are covered under cargo clause A. You call ICC clause A, Institute Cargo Clauses A. That is the best policy to take, warehouse to warehouse, cover the entire risk elements. But premiums are a bit expensive. It's worthwhile taking this kind of insurance when the commodity prices are valuable in nature. So go for a ICC A clause. B clause is a moderate risk, moderate level. The premium also a moderate amount. But definitely, the risk point of view, Institute Cargo Clause B will cover more risk than the Cargo Clause C. But premium wise, Institute Cargo Clause B little lesser than the Cargo Clause A, because Cargo Clause A cover the most risk. Except there are certain natural risks that you don't cover in the insurance policy, like war, civil, strike, willfully somebody come and damage it. Those things will there is a riots, right? So unless otherwise, if you want to cover, if the insurance company willing to accept that kind of a risk, right, then you need to pay extraordinary premium. So that is the reason exceptionally the even clause A have a exceptional. They have certain things they don't cover. That is totally risk. They can't calculate the risk. That kind of. That is why I have given example of that kind of risks. Can be war, civil war, uh, locked out. People are not working. Strike. So nothing can be done. Suppose if the container is coming, there is a strike going on in the Colombo port. Workers are not. They are on a strike. As a result, containers are getting delayed. Nothing can be done by the insurance. They don't pay for that, right? Say, something, the risk cannot be covered. The unexpected strikes, purposefully the strike has been taken place, they never foresee. They only foresee in what is happening, because when the things are moved, there is a damage, yes, they will pay. But there is something, a country declared a war with the other country, then this, by the time this vessel go, then how can the insurance pay for all these risk? These are, and sometimes there are naturally goods can exposed to risk. Those kind of risks you can't take a risk. Suppose say if it's oil or whatever crude oil, when you open, it burns out quickly, right? Evaporate. It has to be covered in such a way. So that kind of risk, if you happen to cover that risk, even ammunition, right? So these are risks the cargo clause A even doesn't cover. But generally, possible most of the risks are covered in the clauses A. So clauses A is the better policy. Clauses C the lesser insurance. If you take, I think when you try to turn Incoterms, I think if you take a lesser insurance is much convenient for you up to that point. So we will learn in the when you are learning Incoterms is the insurance cover less risk. So the lower premium, right? Foreign exchange rate risk. This is the other risk. Yes, foreign exchange is the rate fluctuation. Now see, dollar we are talking about. Why the import things are expensive? Because the dollar rate shot up to $200, right? And the people need to wait to clear the goods because bank do not have foreign reserve. So the import consignments are become pretty expensive. They need to pay more. There is the damages. They are unable to clear. So by the time when you clear the goods, it's become very expensive. Why? Because of the exchange rate fluctuation. So that increase the uh, your prices. As a result, you might lose the market. So whether you import or export, the exchange rate matters. So if you think of exporter, our exporter has been exporting tea or coconut or rubber or garments or whatever, they get in turn in dollars. So for the exporter, if the dollar price is going up, it's a good sign because they get more rupees, right? They get more rupees, right? But if you if you happen to import, right? If you're exporting dollar 205, 210, well and good because you convert into your export to rupee, you get more. Then you look at the inflation also because when you're converting into rupee, the rupee, because then it's become rupee, you don't have foreign reserve anymore, right? You know the recent restriction, right? Whether you are a good exporter or services, when you are bringing foreign exchange into the country, uh, there are five exceptional given. You need to spend for that. Then residue balance will be converted within the matter of 1 month into rupees. Whether it's a goods or service exporter, that is the regulation now in Sri Lanka. You are aware, right? I think I explained to you previous class. So that is that is the current restrictions, right? When you are exporter of goods or services earning foreign exchange, when you are bringing, say, this exporter brings the dollars into the country, $10,000. So he has been permitted to use the $10,000 to buy raw material for his import. do a current transaction, right? To utilize for his travel expenses. If he has taken a foreign currency loan to settle that loan, right? And he can invest in Sri Lankan development bond in dollars. So if he has $10,000, he is unable to utilize any of these five, then matter of 1 month, everything will be converted into rupee. That is the regulation. So it's applicable to service provider. So yeah, if I am a service provider, I am providing some services to overseas. I am getting $5,000 by providing a service, and I don't foresee any of those five expenses that is given. I'm not doing anything. So I have one option. I can invest in Sri Lanka development bond, maximum 10% of my inward remittances. Right. So other than that, I can't do anything. So if I'm getting $10,000, at 10% I can invest $1,000 into Sri Lankan development bond. Balance 9,000 if I'm unable to spend for any other permitted expenses, my dollar will be converted into rupee, whether I'm an exporter of goods or services. That is how the regulation. So that is foreign exchange risk here. So you're unable to keep your dollars because there is also local regulation comes in, right? So it's commercially uh, necessary to mitigate this exchange rate risk. If the rate is going up and down, then you need to take precautionary measures to avoid this. The exposure that you're going to incur due to the exchange fluctuation can be minimized, right? In a volatile situation. So if you take Sri Lanka rupee, now the dollar is going up. So the dollar was 180, 90, all of a sudden it's shot up to 200. Now it's stuck there 200 to 205 up and down. It's there fluctuate between 200 to 210, right? So now the dollar is kind of a fix, like 210 to 200. It's not moving anything more than that. So it has been forcefully fixed, right? But in reality, if you go to the market, it could be traded not at 210, it's you can buy it at 240. So you can see the actual market rate for a dollar is is not the bank rate. If the market forces decided it's 230 or 240, but uh, it has been kept at a fixed rate of 210, because you need to do that, otherwise the import become very expensive. If you open out, if you need to pay dollar, there will be dollar, most dollar will go up because there are a lot of imports uh, listed. So 240, 250, then most of the goods will be more expensive. So in a way, keeping that dollar to a certain extent will minimize the cost. So the cost of the so what are the mitigating factors to come out of this? Yeah, you do a market research and see what course of action you can take, right? Uh, so exchange rate fluctuation is something that you are unable to predict, right? So if you are an importer, book a forward contract. And so forward exchange booking is something that you can do it, right? So take example. In the current situation, it's not that very conducive to do because the rate is almost fixed like 205 to 210. But in real situation, let's say the dollar is trading at 190 rupees, and if you feel the dollar can go up to 200 rupees, if you're an importer, right? If you're an importer, when you open the LC, the dollar is trading at 190 rupees, right? And when you imports, by the time when the import reaches to Sri Lanka, you anticipate dollar to go 200 rupees. The time open the LC 190. So what you will do at the time of opening the LC, you ask the bank, I want to book a forward rate. I want to book a forward contract rate for my dollar. I need to pay $10,000. I have opened the LC for $10,000. The dollar rate at the time open the LC is 190. What would be 3 months for? Because you want to book a forward 3 months, because by the time when your goods come and the documents come, it takes 3 months time. So you want to book a forward contract with the bank, asking the banks to give me a rate. I will be utilizing my $10,000 when it comes. When the rate is 190, is asking the bank to give a rate. If he thinks, though the today is 190, after 3 months time, the dollar might go up to 200 rupees. So at that time, when he pays, he is incurring 10 rupees more for each dollar. So he's asking bank whether they can book a forward contract. So what bank will do? Bank will offer him a forward contract rate, 3 months forward contract rate, forward rate, by looking at the interest rate, inflation rate, right? They put everything together. then interest rate of the dollar to Sri Lanka rupee, inflation, everything put together, they will say, okay, they also foresee how the market forces reacting, and they will say they will fix it at the rate of 194. So he booked a forward when the rate is 190, he booked a forward for 194. Right after 3 months time, when the dollar, when these documents arrive, when the goods come, the dollar was 199. So he has the benefit of 5 rupee, because though when the dollar was 190, he booked a forward for 3 months. What do you mean by book a forward? When he import $10,000 worth of LC, when he open LC, he knows after 3 months he need to pay the bank whatever prevailing rate into $10,000 he has to pay. But when he opened the LC, the rate was 190. But he thinks the rate might go up by the time when the document reaches after 3 months' time. He feels the rate might go up to 200. So he want to reduce the exposure, the risk. So he asked the bank to give a rate. So the bank has quoted a rate. Okay, we are giving you 194 forward rate. What does it mean? After 3 months' time, when the documents come, the bank will give you at the rate of 194 to calculate the $10,000, irrespective of whatever the rate prevail at that time. So when the documents comes at that after 3 months, the maturity period, so you will be paying the agreed rate of 194, not the prevailing rate 199. Right? That is the advantage of by booking a forward contract. So it's better to mitigate the risk by booking a forward contract in it when is the rate fluctuation. It is also essential to recognize the tools available hedging. Yeah, in Sri Lanka, we don't have much of hedging tool. You need to, because Sri Lanka hedging is you need to combine your underlying transaction with a forecasted rate. So you need to book a forward, you need to have underlying transaction. So you can't, some other countries, you can even without showing the import contract, you can do hedging. But in Sri Lanka, we don't have probably derivatives and all. Derivatives is a tool that is hedging, one of the tools that may come, time to come, not immediately, right? So I think it's in the pipeline. So it will be, so you need to prepare your downside contingency. So whatever losses, what is the best way to downsize, I think, reduce your losses? You need to mitigate your risks. Best course of action is you need to be aware of the currency, whether switching over the different currency is possible, or do a forward contract, right? So these are something external factor. You have a lesser control, remember. So there are certain factors, risks you can, but there are certain risks you won't be able to do because these are totally depend on the external environment. Legal risk, yeah. This is lacking of a legal framework. You need to have some knowledge when you are, especially when you are signing an agreement, contract with the other party, the which governing law will applicable. That is the legal risk. Which governing jurisdiction mean a different jurisdiction mean when you are dealing with Japan and Sri Lanka, jurisdiction mean Japanese law will apply to the seller, Sri Lankan law will apply to the buyer. That is a different jurisdiction. The exporter from Japan, he prefers Japanese jurisdiction to come. Sri Lankan guy prefers Sri Lankan law because they know their law better than the unknown other territory law. So always that is the legal risk. So you need to compromise when you two people are in. So both party might say, Sri Lankan might say, I don't know the Japanese law, but I know English law. So whether English law is a common law, whether you will accept English law. So it's a Japanese person to decide. If he also agreeable, okay, they might go for the English law, which is a common law for both countries. So they will prefer for the English law for the set. So this is how when you are signing a contract, when you are getting into an agreement, you know what are the things, the legal jargon that might impact uh, your capabilities, or that might impact the underlying transaction as a result, or when there's a dispute arises between parties concerned in the legal contract, what course of action to be taken. In the event course of action to be taken, whether it's protected from which law, that is called legal risk. So you need to a little bit of when you're signing a contract, is always better to refer it to a lawyer, go through the legal. Big banks does this. When you open, when you are doing a contract, always it's referred to the legal department, get the lawyer's advice, whether are we expose ourselves to unnecessarily to somebody, or are we taking precautions measures to cover the entire risk as per the legal document that you sign, right? So there are legal jargon. If the clauses are not very precise, get a third party opinion, especially from a lawyer, get that clarified, or you may, a lawyer might say, reword it in such a way where the other party is agreeable. So you may reword it in such a way to which may be beneficial for both parties, right? Sure. So if you are not willing to do that, then there is no other option. You might say, no, I'm not agreeable. So you might leave that contract. So you need to be aware of whether you are in a stronger position to dictate terms to the other party or other party dictating terms to you. So it's depending on what kind of a relationship, what kind of a commodity, goods or services that you are buying or selling, depending on that, whether what is your position, right? And sometimes as the importer, in Sri Lankan importer, we are at a desperate situation only to import. We agreeable for all the terms and conditions. So we are at a very bad shape. If you are exporter, you might say, if you don't come to my terms, I don't ship. So there again, our commodities, we don't have much commodities to export in dictating such terms, right? So where that is where weak economy is need to be further strengthened for us to export. Now, say, take example, if you're importing from China, China will dictate all the terms. We need to agree for that because there's no other way we can go and buy the same commodity at that price. So you may have to listen to them. That is where they are at a stronger position. But still, you need to work out and see what risk you are adhering to these unknown conditions. What would be the exposure you are going to foresee? So that is where you need to import and exporter my get the opinion, and they always uh, trying to take their own courts preferably when there's a dispute comes. They don't want to go to Japanese court and argue because we never know, right? And it will be very expensive affair. So legally something you need to be careful because once you get into the legal case, it's always very expensive affair. So what are the mitigating factors? Yeah, you need to, if there is a dispute come, you may say, okay, if both party, we need to put an independent arbitrator if there's a dispute. So there's a common person comes in as arbitrator. So he will do, for both parties are fighting each other, then they will say, shall we go for arbitrator? So the arbitrator is a neutral person. He comes as a problem resolver. So you need to refer this your contract to the professional, get their opinion, law firms, choice of, and if you are negotiate firmly to minimize the legal protection or refuse to deal. Yeah, you need to be very, the negotiation capability. You need to be very careful. You need to be very when it comes to negotiation. You need to be very precise because you can't just for the sake of buying goods, you can't expose yourself, right? So you need to be aware of, you need to negotiate firmly because the other party trying to force you to sign this contract. uh, though you are in a desperate situation, you need to work out your risk, what is right. So you would have seen some example, right, where these people have gone and signed a contract. As a result, we have to pay for substantial losses, right? So that is also to be mindful. Professional who can provide valid support during the contract negotiation. Yeah, that is, you need to make sure get the professional support to. Yes. Now, in internationally, we have some comfort, right? You always, I think we had discussed ICC, International Chamber of Commerce, published certain rules. These are not law, remember. These are rules, simply rules. So ICC, UCP, they publish LCs, URR, Uniform Rules for Collection, URC, then Uniform Rules for Demand Guarantee, then Incoterms, all that they publish. That is because to eliminate this risk factor. So the moment you adopted this contract is subject to ICC clause, this and no, so you are coming into a common platform because both party agree for ICC. ICC is the International Chamber of Commerce. Everybody knows this is the common. So this is the best practices. So this is doesn't take anybody's side. It's a neutral. So by adopting ICC rules to your contract is the most beneficial way to get rid of the law. Because law is unknown territory to you. If you are from Sri Lanka, Japanese law is unknown territory. Same way, Japanese person look at the Sri Lanka laws, for them is unknown territory. But they prefer ICC rules to be applied. Then it's more compromising. Each party will know their obligation under which category, under up to what extent their responsibility, up to what extent the other party responsibility, what are the obligations, because ICC very precisely tell each one obligation, right? So especially Incoterms and all will precisely tell you what kind of counterfeit goods. This is of course fake. So you need to be, at first shot, you need to be get out of this fake contract. So you need to be very important, the party that you are dealing with. So this is happening mostly. The importers are getting affected because of the counterfeit goods. This is not the exporter. Remember, this entire thing is done by the exporter. So the affected party is importer, because the importer sending advance payment, importer open the LC. Ultimately, the exporter send the counterfeit goods, fake goods. This is happening mostly, right? So they send the fake goods, though you send the payment already. So this is again, as I told you, the relationship matters, right? And there could be independent people you're dragging into the contract by getting an inspection certificate, pre-inspection certificate. These are the something that could reduce this kind of a risk, right? So suppose say you are want to import a brand new vehicle, you're getting a reconditioned vehicle from Thailand, right? Then to see it has to be brand new vehicle, but a reconditioned vehicle has come. But if you insist for a pre-shipment certificate, before the shipment, I want a pre-shipment certificate and done by independent authority, then you know whether the independent authority says this is a brand new car or used car. So better to incorporate, always incorporate, to avoid unnecessary argument with the supplier or conflict with the quality of the goods. So first of all, you know which party you are dealing with. Then you call for some inspection certificate, pre-shipment certificate, in order to avoid the counterfeit goods. This is generally happen. Some rotten people they are around. I think this has happened when we imported. We have a lot of examples in Sri Lankan importers, right? This is mostly affected by the importer, not the exporter. Counterfeit goods is sent by exporter, so there's no loss to them. The always importer got affected in this case, counterfeit goods, right? So when we imported pepper from Pakistan, and there is a different commodity, inferior quality. The pepper seeds have been exported in some cases. Steel, we have imported steel. Then ultimately the rotten, corroded, some junk foods have been sent, goods have been sent. The importer lost millions of money. So these, because then you have to take a separate legal action to sue the customer, blacklist the customer through the government channel, right? There again, you need to be careful. Especially, you should know the party whom you are dealing with. So if you know the party, you can avoid this counterfeit goods mostly, right? So what are the mitigating? Yeah, inspection certificate. You have a pre-shipment inspection certificate. You can incorporate. Yeah, when you inspection certificate, better to call for a specialized independent company who are doing it. I think there are some companies who does this, right? Obtain maximum insurance protection. Yeah, insurance also you must take, because insurance also something that you sharing the loss with the third party. So these are the mitigating factors when it comes to counterfeit goods, right? Documentary fraud. Yeah, this is again the seller, mostly seller, uh, send the documentary fraud, inferior quality, but he sends as a brand new vehicle. Now, say for the same example, they can even forge the documentary, because actual good sent is rotten, but the document says something else. So this is mostly happen in LCs, right? When you open letter of credit, uh, these common occurrence happening, right? So This practically, I think recently we had a case in one of our bank. Uh, I think they imported the uh, sanitary wares, right? Yeah, sanitary wares, taps and washroom basins and all. To see, they are supposed to get 500 pieces each, but ultimately the exporter sent only 2 pieces in one full container. That again, one brand new item, another brand new item, and rest of the thing is nothing. So now see how these people are cheating others. So you need to be very careful when you're opening a letter of credit. It doesn't mean just because of you are dealing with a counterparty who tell you to open LLC, you are getting down all this. Check the background of the particular supplier. That is very, very important. By opening LC, you are committed. Your bank is already opened LC. He is getting the money. Now he trying to play you out. How do you play? He wanted LC for $1 million, and he sent the goods for not even $50,000. So you are getting cheated, right? Because he sends a document. It's a document fraud. Because he said one container full of sanitary item, 500 pieces. He put it in the invoice. But actually, when you go and check it, when you clear the container to see, you have been played out by the supplier. So you need to be careful. Though you open the LC doesn't mean you are getting the expected or required quality of goods from the supplier. You need to check the background of the supplier before you open the LC, right? Mostly because we are talking about the payment risk the supplier exposed, but supply also on the other side, he is also not doing his performance most of the time. So when it comes to documentary credit, the importer mostly got affected, buyer mostly got affected because of this documentary fraud done by the seller, right? Fraud. What is the mitigating factor? Satisfy themselves. Yeah, the standing integrity is the only way. The relationship matters here, right? Yeah, most of the time the poor applicant got affected because applicant opened the LC with a good intention that seller will send the good because he issued the performer invoice. He said, I will send you the goods, I want you to open the LC. This poor guy take the performer and go to the bank and open the LC. The issuing bank given the undertaking to the seller. Now the seller unfortunately fraud the documents and try to get the payment, right? So what is the best course of action? Studying the financial standing of the beneficiary. Yeah, that is the only way you can avoid this. Before open, whether it's a reputed company, whether they have done this thing in past, whether are they valuable for this amount of LCs that are open, right? Checking on it. Checking the location and the contractual vehicle. Yeah, once the vessel is shipped, you get a pre-shipment, whether to see whether this location, the vessel is tracking, whether the vessel is coming through the same way, because most of the time these people does so many things. uh, we can see not into our context in international trade they do a lot of wrongful thing, especially they in the middle way they purposely damage the vessel and claim the insurance, right? So these things could happen. So you should know, you should not be a, the importer should not be the person ultimately getting loss. At least to some point they should know uh, by independent inspector to inspect and send a pre-shipment certificate, or at least get something done. uh, this is something interesting, accepting a time draft instead of site draft. Yeah, better to, when you are, you know, we studied LCs, site LCs, accept and user. So better to get that. Better if you're getting a acceptance draft, that means you are giving a time period by the seller. So remember, when a time period is given, he generally do not, he does the right thing, because he knows when he side payment only, he can send the inferior quality and claim it under LC. When it's acceptance LC, he won't get the money. Then he has to make sure the compliance set of documents are sent, and not only that, the goods also to be quality. Otherwise, he will be exposed. Why? If he send, let's say there is exporter who sends compliance set of documents and he send the inferior quality goods. Let's say he is supposed to send 100 numbers of washroom taps and basins, each 100 number, about 500 quantity. So entire document says 500 pieces consist of 100 pieces this, 100 pieces washroom, tap, all these are there. Total number of 500 pieces. The documents 500 and the actual goods also 500 should be. But this guy only said 100 and put 500 commodities. But in reality, it's only 100 items coming, but whereas invoice have been fraud for 500. Then, if the documents is a time frame. So what happens when the documents come? The importer will not pay immediately because importer insisted for 90 days credit period. Now he is accepting the draft and go and clear the goods. When he go and clear the goods, he only can see 100. But whereas 500 numbers, the document says. So he will say he will take a court injunction and he will not make the payment. So only way to, when you're opening LC, only way to avoid this by making an acceptance draft. Not that site payment. Site mean immediately you have to make the payment. So accepting a time draft. But there again, the seller might go, if he willfully defaulter, he might not agree for accepting a time draft. He will always insist for the site draft. So the only way out to come out of this issue is to check the quality of the particular person's integrity. Right. Now we stop it for a break. So I think we have discussed. So I will give you break of 15 minutes. Now 3:40, 41. Right. So we will meet sharp. I think I'll give you sharp. We will have 1.5 hours to discuss. Maybe sharp 4 o'clock. Nothing. So I'm giving little more than 15 minutes. Sharp 4 o'clock we will meet and continue till 5:30 and try to, if time permits, we'll discuss some question also. So we will meet you at 4 o'clock, right? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Can you
yes.
you can hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Right, fine. Okay. So I think all this time, I'm sorry, extremely very sorry. So you are not here all this time. Okay, okay. So why it was kept silent? I'm sorry. So Incoterms, I will just repeat quickly, go through it. I'm sorry for that. There are three things you need to look at under Incoterms: obligation, risk, and cost. There are two parties involved: exporter and importer, right? Exporter and importer. There are obligation, there are risk, there is called something called cost. All three factors need to be taken care of. When seller quoting a price, he always quote a price up to what cost is bearing, up to what obligation is doing, at which point the risk is transfer. So the Incoterms is generally considered as when you incorporate a contract of whatever underlying transaction when you are dealing with, your underlying contract will carry a price with the Incoterms three-letter word followed by a place, right? So it could be FOB, it could be CIF, cost insurance, or delivered at place, right? So there are 11 Incoterms that have been used. Each Incoterms, you need to look at three perspective: obligation, up to what obligation seller will do, up to what obligation the buyer is supposed to do, at what risk, at what point the risk will transfer from seller to buyer or exporter to importer, who bears what costs. So these are the three elements of obligation, risk, and cost, right? So these Incoterms are grouped into four groups: C terms, D terms, E terms, F terms. So C terms is cost and freight, CFR, cost insurance paid, CIF, carriage paid to CPT, carriage insurance paid to fourth term. These four terms, you can see the main carriage is paid by the seller. The carriage is paid by, because what happened when the seller quote a price, he included the freight cost into the price. So that is where the seller take care of the cost of the freight. So the C terms, the seller bear the cost of main freight. Freight is where the cost paid for the movement of goods. It could be air freight, sea freight, or roadway, railway, whatever the cost, right? D terms, these are seller arrange the main carriage risk. So the D terms where it will be delivered to the buyer's place, right? Mostly these things will use for multimodal. Land access, where it's sea, it could be railway, right? So whatever mode, these all three terms can be used, right? So these terms are used. Delivery point, up to deliver, he goes and deliver, so definitely will be charging more, right? Then the E term come next work, the lowest uh, responsibility taken by the seller, the exporter, X work. The goods are ready at his warehouse, X works. Then the F terms, which is uh, the seller keeps the goods at a particular place where the main carriage is paid by the buyer. So these are the four groups the CIFs, the Incoterms grouped into: C term, D term, E term, F term, right? So let us look at each term. Here the X work, EXW, where the seller says goods are ready at my warehouse. Now you could see these X works can be used for all mode of transports. That is what you could see in the picture. There is a flight, air, there is a roadway, there could be rail even included, the seaway, ship, right? So this is for any mode of transport, this term can be used. So the simple theory, the seller keep the goods at his warehouse, it's ready, his warehouse. And buyer has to take the entire obligation, responsibility, everything has to buy. You can see in the picture there's a red dot there, red mark. Up to that point, seller takes. So you can see entire rest of the every responsibility, obligation, everything taken care of the buyer. So that is the yellow mark. So the buyer is yellow mark, seller is red mark. The seller point is goods are ready at his warehouse. He keep the goods ready, packed and ready. At that point, he's quoting a price. So definitely he will quote the best price for X work, right? So that is the lowest price he can quote, because he's not doing anything. He's only keeping the goods at that warehouse, right? So you need to understand in international trade, right? If you do not understand the Incoterms, definitely both parties getting into problem, right? Both should understand their obligation, where the risks are exposed, transfer to the other party from seller to buyer, and what cost, who is bearing that cost. So these are the three things the Incoterms incorporated. So there are 11 Incoterms. Out of 11 Incoterms, there are 7 Incoterms used for all modes that we are going to study one by one, and the 4 are exclusively used for CPO, right? So let us see. In this, risk is transfer when the goods are placed at this disposal of the buyer. This is keeping the goods at the seller's premises for the disposal of the buyer. Buyer has to come all the way to take the goods and go. So these are good for the landlocked country like France, Italy. So I was quoting an example until I didn't know that it was muted, right? So sorry for that. I'll repeat the same example. There is a shoe manufacturer in Italy, right? He's quoting a price, and he's quoting a one pair of shoe at euro 100 euro. And as I told you, in international trade, you can't quote a price of 100 euro and stop it. You have to quote a price 100 euro XW Milan. So there will be in international, when you're quoting a price currency will be there, euro, an amount will be there, followed by three-letter word, and end up with a place or a port or a name place or a name post or a nominated place will be definitely mentioned. That is the full term of a pricing. So unlike when you go and purchase a mobile from a local domestically, if you go and buy a smartphone, you pay 50,000 rupees and purchase a phone. Your price is 50,000. There's nothing added. You go and physically pick up the phone with a warranty, you buy it and come. But in international, you can't do that. The goods are in different location. So that guy says X works. That means you should understand the goods are ready his warehouse, whether you can go and take it from him. That is his pricing. So you need to understand This X works mean what? As a buyer, what I'm supposed to do when you're quoting a price? You should aware of Incoterms. Otherwise, you are into problem. You pay the money and wait, the goods will come. You goods never going to come because goods are ready at his warehouse. So you need to do everything. So you can see the yellow lines are dot. Yellow lines, all three lines are the response given to the buyer. Buyer has to do the rest of the things. The seller even not even think of doing insurance because he's not doing anything. He's simply keep the goods at his warehouse. That is the lowest price. So X work is the lowest Incoterm used, lowest responsibility taken care of by the seller, exporter. The entire obligation comes into the buyer. So the buyer will do everything, but the prices will be very attractive because the buyer has to do it. But in general terms, this has a lot of difficulties, right? If there are two countries involved, generally X works may not be possible because the buyer doesn't have anything, can't understand in seller's country's regulation. So unless otherwise, this is countries like Italy, France is possible. Italy, Germany, France possible because these are landlocked country. You can get into the other country by land. So maybe possible in this region. That is what these are work for multimodal transport, land access, railway access, inland waterway, right? Sea, air may be not possible because uh, if unless otherwise that other party agreeable. Otherwise, you have to all the way to come and get it. So X work can be used for any mode, but it's up to the buyer to take care of X work and do the rest of the things. Right. Let us move on to the free carrier. What is he doing here? Here, you can see his little bit of job is doing. The red marks are in all three lines. He is arranging the transport because he has to come and hand over the goods to a particular place up to the carrier. So the buyer has nominated this particular person will take care of the goods. So you go and come and give the goods up to that point. So he taking a risk. The seller take additional job of from his warehouse, load into the vehicle, and come and deliver to a particular carrier. Up to that point, he's going to quote a price. So his price will be little more than the X works because he's doing a certain job. So you can see the red marks. He started some additional job. So he's going to pay for that. He's going to charge for that. In his price, earlier, as I told you, €100 for the shoe, he might now tell you 110 per euro. And his price will be up to that point, he come and hand it over. So he will be quoting a price of not XW, EXW. Now he's quoting free carrier, FCA, and he comes and handing over to that particular carrier at that particular place. Up to that point, he might come with own vehicle and hand over and go. So his price will be €110 now for the same shoe. So you can see seller has no obligation to make the contract. He's not doing the contractor carriage. He's just coming and giving to the carrier. The main carriage has to be done by the carriers, for which buyer has nominated somebody. Right? So the main carriage is paid by the buyer. So he's not doing anything. So you can see yellow lines are there. Goods are moving. The main thing is goods from one location to other location. That is the main carriage. That is not done by the seller. It is buyer has to take care. So still the yellow line, lengthy lines are there. Buyer to take response. So seller has taken little more than the X work. He has come and handed over goods to a nominated carrier. Right? Nominated by the buyer. So that is where the delivery point. Risk of transfer, I bold it. See, risk transfer from seller to the buyer at the point of goods are delivered to the carrier or another person nominated by the buyer to the seller. So seller has nominated, give the goods to so and so, or the so and so is the carrier. Up to that place, he would have mentioned. So up to that point, seller will come and hand over and go. After that, insurance, everything need to be taken care of the buyer. Seller will not do anything. That is free carrier, right? This is again multimodal. You can see all mode of transports are there. Okay. Now carriage paid to. You can see carriage paid to. You can see one red line is full here. You can see in that diagram, in the picture, one main carriage transport is paid by the seller because he's paying the carriage. So his pricing is now carriage paid to. He's paying the carriage. The main carriage is paid. That is what you can see the red line up to that obligation paying the freight is done by the seller. So the seller will definitely increase the shoe price to €125 because he's taking care of the main transport cost. So he will be adding to the price. It is not 110, it is 125 now, right? So that is you call carriage paid to. So you can see the diagram. I have given the diagram for you to understand better. So the seller taking the responsibility to under the main carriage is paying, but the rest of the things you can see is risk transfer. At which point the risk transfer from seller to the buyer at the point where the goods are taken charged by the carrier. Though he pay the freight charges, its risk is over. You can the responsibility over the first line. See the first line. The red is started point. Is there up to certain just a few inches is moved because up to that point its risk is there. Thereafter, he's not taking any risk because he handed over to the carrier by paying the freight. Then the freight is taken care of by the uh, seller, but the risk is transferred when the goods are handed over to the carrier. So you should know by carriage paid to. And insured goods, it's up to the buyer to do that. The seller will not do the insurance. If the buyer expecting seller to do, he will do at the risk of the buyer. So always remember, insurance, if the seller, always up to the buyer to take care of the insurance. If the buyer says, can you do the insurance also, seller will do it at the risk of the buyer. So we are looking at the third one. You can see here the insurance also included. Carriage and insurance paid to, CIP. So you can see the price, carriage and insurance paid to. So the main carriage is paid. Even the insurance is paid by the seller. You can see the red lines are there. So the insurance is also paid up to the buyer's point. The freight also paid, but it's risk, it's responsibility at the time he hand over the goods to the carrier. Its responsibility is over. The risk is over. Though he pay the freight and though he pay the insurance, his risk point is when he handing over to the carrier. Thereafter, it is the buyer's responsibility when the goods are reached at the buyer's warehouse. So definitely, the CIP price for the same example I'm quoting, a shoe, he might quote about 140 euro for CIP value because the seller is paying the insurance also. So you can see now, the more responsibility the seller take, the more the prices will be, right? So that is where you got to understand Incoterms. So if you're expecting seller to take more responsibility, he will increase his prices because he's taking more obligation. But you need to look at the risk point, where at that point the risk is transferred, right? Okay. Now delivered at place. Now you can see delivered at place. Now he take care of the responsibility up to the delivery point, right? So he make the cost of the carriage, delivering goods to a particular place. Always remember, delivered at place means there is a nominated place is there. So you can see the risk is transfer, deliver of the goods take place, risk transfer from the seller to the buyer at the point when the goods are available for the unloading. Yes, up to this point he has brought it. From there, the goods has to be unloaded and the delivery will take place by the buyer, right? So it is the question mark, who is going to take the insurance? Eventually buyer has to take the insurance, right? Delivered terms, buyer has to do the insurance. Seller has no obligation to take. If the seller has been asked to take, he will take the insurance policy in the delivery terms, but the buyer's responsibility. Buyer at buyer's risk only they will do the insurance, right? At a buyer's risk. So you can see delivery terms, he take all three responsibility. Even his responsibility will be over by the time when the goods are reached at the delivery level. Because delivered mean he has to take care of his responsibility over once the goods are delivered at the particular point. So where the risk is transferred, that is the point, right? So delivered at place. There is a new Incoterm introduced. I said instead of delivered at terminal, they brought this. Delivered at place, unloading. Now remember, this is the only term where seller is required to unload the goods to complete the delivery. From the carrying vessel, he has to unload the goods, take it from the delivery vehicle and unload it at the place, at the named place. So unloading. So this is a new in 2020. This Incoterm is incorporated as a new term, replacing the delivered at terminal at delivered at place unloading, DPU. Right here, the main carriage is paid by the seller. You can see all three things. Is taking the delivery point, and he's taking the freight. Main freight also is paying, and he's not paying doing the insurance. It's the buyer's obligation. If the buyer wants to seller to do, seller will do with the risk of the buyer. And the delivery point is very important. The goods have been unloaded. So from the delivery vehicle, it has to be unloaded. So it is the only term, only Incoterms where goods have been unloaded to complete the delivery. So this is the more charges will be taken by the seller because he's unloading the goods at the delivery point. So whatever vehicle you are bringing in, you can stop it and the buyer has to unload. But here, seller is unloading on behalf of the buyer so that he will come and take it from his vehicle and go. So it's more responsibility, right? DPU. Then something called delivered duty paid. Here, seller take care of certain duty component also to be paid, right? And he will definitely increase the higher prices for DDP. So this is the Incoterm where the seller take up to the certain duty also is paying, right? So the seller take the responsibility of the main carriage. So you can see all three. Responsibility is taken care of, freight is paying, insurance, he has no obligation. If the buyer wanted him to pay, he will take the insurance also. And up to certain duty also he will pay at the delivery place. If there is any duty involved, he will pay the duty also. So up to that point, so you can see the risky transfer from the seller to buyer at the point when the goods are made available to the buyer, cleared and ready for unloading. Cleared and ready for unloading. He will not do the unloading, unloading the previous term, but here he only pay the duty. Cleared and ready. Cleared and ready mean he has cleared, and that means he has paid the duties, is ready for unloading. So he has to buy, has to unload it and take it care of, and from there. So delivery terms are generally happens when you are a bigger company, whether you have all these procurement arrangement, you have a vehicle arrangements. Bigger company only take the delivery terms. Smaller trader can't afford to do this because he can just send the goods and wait. He can't go to the buyer's country and do logical things unless otherwise it's a bigger international chain only can do the delivery terms. You need to understand by the nature of the job is such they can't do everything, right? There's a limited obligation they can do if they're a small scale trader. If they're a big scale trader, they can take up of the delivery terms, right? So they should have all the fleet of vehicle, they should have the arrangement, they should have agent to do this because delivery terms you are taking certain job in the buyer's country, right? So you need to be aware of, right? Now you can see free alongside ship. You can see only one mark is there on the white color. It is inland and sea. So this term can only used when you are using a sea, water or sea or inland waterway. Free alongside ship. So you can see the ship coming in. The price it's a ship. So definitely it's followed by a particular port. When you quote a price, FAS definitely followed by a Colombo port or German port or Hamburg port or whatever port will be there because it's a shipment, it's a port, right? So you can understand. We are going to study the remaining four. All are sea related, either inland waterway or sea water. So these are the term more related to us because we are being island. We are getting all the Incoterms into sea, right? Okay, the seller is responsible only arranging delivery of the goods. You can see, yeah, here the seller is responsible for arranging delivery of the goods alongside the vessel. So what is here? Alongside the vessel, you keep the container ready. So you don't contract for carriage, main carriage. So you say free alongside the ship. My price is up to keep the container alongside the ship. From there onwards, buyer has to take the entire thing, including freight, everything buyer has to do. So here seller keep the container ready at the alongside the ship, right? So the risk is transfer from the seller to buyer at the point when the goods are placed alongside the vessel nominated by the buyer. So the buyer only will nominate because buyer only going to pay the freight. So buyer only will tell the seller, okay, you come and place it alongside the ship. This is the ship that I'm going to pay freight and collecting goods and getting down to my country. So the buyer going to do rest of the thing. So he has to nominate a particular vessel name. So the seller will go and keep it alongside the vessel. So his price will be free alongside ship. So you should understand why the similar terms is studied in other multimodal wise. So this is you must understand. Other 7 terms cannot be used for C. So C, there are 4 terms separately. That is what all the F free alongside ship. There are 2F, there are 2 C's we are going to learn. Free alongside ship. This is insurance is seller buyer has to take. Seller has no obligation to take the insurance. Then the second one, free on board. This is a frequently used term. The international trade, FOB is a very frequently used term, where seller can keep the container ready on the board, right? On the board, where the goods has to be loaded to the board up to that point. So you can see the delivery point, the risk transfer from the seller to buyer at the point the seller deliver the goods on board the vessel nominated by. On board mean it is kept on the board to the vessel. So the vessel will be nominated by the buyer. So he has to go and take little bit of responsibility. Earlier he kept alongside the vessel. Now he has to go up to the board level and keep it. Therefore, the clearance of export has to be done by the seller. So he has to keep, because when you go up to the board, you have to do the export clearance, right? So export clearance need to be uh, done by the seller. So seller take little responsibility compared to free alongside ship. FOB prices little more, right? So you can see FOB is other term used in international trade, where the goods will be ready on board the vessel, loaded on board the vessel, right? Insurance, same again. The buyer has to take the insurance. Seller will not take the insurance unless seller cover is exposure. Let's say if we are the seller, if we are exporting tea, let's say take example, if we are exporting tea to Japan, right? We are taking our seller taking the container. He has quoted the price, FOB Colombo port, right? So seller will nominate, the buyer will arrange a vessel. So importer, the exporter, Sri Lankan tea exporter will take the container all the way to the Colombo port. Now see the risk that importer take, the exporter take. From his warehouse, goods are going on the road and is getting into the port, and from there export clearance is done and is go up to the on board the vessel. Up to that point, the seller take the price. So here the risk is there. So seller has to do the insurance to cover this part. But when the main carriage going from Colombo port to Tokyo port, let the buyer does. So you can see in the FOB, all three yellow lines are there till buyer will have to do everything. He has to do the freight, he has to do the insurance. The seller's obligation is over when the container is handed over to the board, on board, to the nominated vessel. The seller will arrange the vessel, because seller is the buyer is arranging the freight, buyer is arranging the insurance. All that is he has to arrange. The seller's responsibility over by leaving the goods on the board, right? So that is free on board. Cost and freight. Cost and freight. What is this? Is the seller taking extra main carriage also is going to make. So he's going to bear the cost of the freight. So you can see the main freight paid by the seller. So the red line goes up to the buyer's, that responsibility taken by the seller. So cost and freight mean here the price is cost and freight. The seller gives the price. I am taking care of freight, so my price will be little more. So if a Sri Lankan tea exporter does the tea to Japan, he taking care of the container and going up to the board, giving the container to the board, but he's paying the freight, right? But his risk is over when the goods are unloaded onto the board. And when the goods are placed on the board, its risk is over that point. But he has paid the freight up to the destination, the freight. So that is what the cost and freight, right? The insurance has to be taken care of the buyer, right? So if the seller if the seller has been asked to do the insurance, he will do it for the buyer's risk. So there are cases the insurance, wherever where taking insurance in your own country may be cheaper, but when it comes to a seller's country, the seller has a better choice to take the insurance rather than you are buyer. Now think of insurance taking by the Sri Lankan exporter will take the insurance on behalf of the buyer if he interested, because the goods are consigning from Colombo port all the way to the Tokyo port. So unless the Tokyo importer, the tea importer, has some arrangement to take a insurance policy in Sri Lanka, that is what. Though the seller is no obligation to do that, on the request of the buyer, seller might do it, but the risk is up to him. He can arrange the insurance, but he have to pay for it. but he's officially under this term is not willing to do. He is not supposed to do. But yes, the last term CIF here is paying that. So you can see here is price is cost, insurance, and freight, which is CIF. Now the Sri Lankan tea exporter take care of all three: cost, insurance, freight, all three. And remember, since he's taking the freight and taking the insurance, right? Both insurance and freight, the entire journey is covered. So you can see freight also doing, insurance also doing. But his risk is at what point? At the point he handing over the vessel to the onboard. From that point, his risk is covered. Risk is over from that point. But he's taking care of the red line, the responsibility, insurance also he has taken care of. The freight also he has made. So his price will be little more. So Sri Lankan tea exporter selling it on CIF Tokyo port, the price might be higher comparison to the previous term, CFR. Here he has not taken the insurance, but here he is taking the insurance under CIF. So the seller will quote more price for this, though he is not officially uh, uh, here he is not officially make the insurance claim here, and this term is doing the insurance. So his price will be definitely more than the CFR, and the CIF price will be more than the CFR price because the seller, including the insurance, also is taking care of. So this is how the Incoterms are used, right? So the Incoterms will give you how to mitigate the risk. Uh, it's always is better the taking insurance, as I told you, from warehouse to warehouse, insurance need to be covered. So the parties who, whatever the Incoterm you use, make sure the buyers cover the entire insurance policy. Ultimately, the buyer is the one getting the goods down to his country. So he make sure the goods are covered, right? So seller can protect himself, loss or damage up to the point he delivers, right? So seller is not highly worried about, and the ex work is not at all worried about. The goods are ready, is warehouse. But if he using his own vehicle, if he is confident, he might take the insurance, or he might not take. But advisable, when the goods are moving on the road from his warehouse, the insurance need to be taken care of. Whether the buyer going to do the main insurance, at least the seller, there are certain element he's also taking risk. Suppose a Sri Lankan tea exporter taking the container up to Colombo port, there could be so much, so there could be accident in the roadworthy. When it comes on the road, the container can topple, right? And the container can be straight collided with the other vehicle, and the entire container damage. Who is going to bear the cost? It has to be covered by the insurance. So the insurance is important in the marine insurance policy. That's what we learn the insurance cargo clause, right? Uh, Under delivery point, each delivery point, insurable interest should be there. So you need to understand, when you are insuring a particular commodity, you should have an insurable interest. So insurable interest is with the buyer, because ultimately the buyer is going to take the responsibility. So if he giving the green light the seller to take, then the seller can take on behalf of the buyer. But the insurable interest should be there to establish before take the insurance, right? So the mitigating factors: use the proper Incoterm, understand the Incoterm's responsibility, risk factor, and the cost factor. Then most of the risk could be avoided. Right. This is something international trade fraud, money laundering. I think we learn money laundering, right? So money laundering is the channel. The international trade is used uh, to integrate the fraud money or money laundered money. So there you can see you are getting an invoice to pay 50,000 advance payment, to see that 50,000 is a illegal money channel through the banking channel. So this is where you have the AML KYC system in place. So for that, you know who is the sender, who is the recipient, what is the underlying transaction. All that is, by getting a KYC form, you can refrain from these money laundering activities. Generally, money laundering activities are done through the trade transaction. It's disguised. The origin is disguised, and it taking the different form. So that trade will be treated as a fresh transaction. It's not so. So you have to be very careful. uh, the money laundering is generally taking place through the trade activities. So you need to check whether there is underlying transaction with the seller, with the buyer, whether there is a supportive invoice is given. That is what, whenever you do the payment, you ask for a commercial invoice, or when you, before you open the performa invoice, you're asking. So you need to do a thorough checkup. Sometimes bank going up to the extent to check the actual supplier, whether there is a company in existence in the performer invoice given. If it is a reputed firm, you need not to worry. Their names are there, popular company. Then there are there are, when it comes to money laundering, there are totally unknown company will appear in the list. So you need to be aware of. That is the point you need to check to evade that transaction or committing that transaction. So you need, that is a critical point. That sometimes comes with experience, but as a banker, they're supposed to check the finer points. Especially these finer points are missed out, mean then the entire transaction is missed out. So you need to be careful. Hacking, you know what is hacking? Yeah, unauthorized access. This is where most of the trade transaction. I think when it comes to uh, advance payments, especially this hacking taking place, most of the people's email have been hacked, and they have lost so much of money. So the bank that I was working, we had the experience about 5 to 6 cases. They are lost, and not only our bank, there are so many local banks in Sri Lanka, and people have lost millions of money. It's coming into millions of rupees, thousands of dollars, right? Uh, how it take place? This is what the hackers does, right? So you need to be careful. The email phishing and cybercrime. So let me explain to you, right? Now uh, there are instances you get your customer coming to you with an invoice and say they want to make an advance payment, right? Advance payment, right? They got a invoice, they want to make an advance payment. Let's say 30,000, 40,000, up to $50,000 out of rupee account. You are permitted to do advance payment, right? So that's fine. Now with the present situation, you need to check the chess code whether the advance payment can be made. All that is extra precaution you to make with the existing working environment. You need to check the HS code and see whether this item could be imported. That extra part you need to check, right? When that part is there, fine, the goods can be imported. Now you're going to make an advance payment. Now remember, this invoices is downloaded by the importer through the email system, right? So the email what he uses is a common platform, either Gmail or what. He doesn't have a secured email, right? So he's using a common email, right? So he goes to the Gmail and is downloaded the invoices and then comes and give it to you. So now you are going to, so this is what happened. Now see, the guy looking, and when there are two people exchanging messages by the emails or whatever, the guy who intercept between this communication and see what is going on, because all three of you, the sender and the receiver and the guy, the fraudster, all three are in the common page. So the fraudster knows what are the communication taking place between the buyer and the seller. At the right time, he intercept and change the information when they exchange the documents in the common email platform. So I will give you an example. If you look at this screen, email and cybercrime, especially the last line, international bank account number. I think we studied IBAN number, right? I think, as I told you, most of the European country got into this IBAN style. The account numbers are IBAN style, right? What do you mean by IBAN style? IBAN is stand for International Bank Account Number. So as we learned what is IBAN number, IBAN is mostly the European countries all got into IBAN category. What does it mean? Each country will identify their account with the country code. Then you will have the bank code. You have your check code. You have your branch code and the account number, type of account. All that is put it into one alphanumerical series of numbers. That is your particular valid IBAN number, right? Suppose say if a Barclays might say our IBAN number GB is Great Britain, the country code come, then BARC Barclays code can come, then their check code can come, then the branch code can come, then the account number can come. So that's a lengthy alphanumerical number. So if you take any Europe country for that matter, take German or France or Italy, if you ask somebody's account number, everybody will give the account number starting with Italy, IT. All the accounts are IBAN style. So in other words, they have streamlined the accounting. So if you in Sri Lanka, we are not IBAN using. So everybody gives their bank account number according to their bank. Some bank might have a 10-digit number, some bank might have a 12-digit number, some bank might have a Bank of Ceylon might have a 8-digit number, vary. But when you say IBAN style, enter Sri Lanka into one way of doing. LK will come. Say we get into IBAN style Sri Lanka, so our all account number will start with LK. Everybody, company, individual, everybody's account is start with LK. Then your bank code will come. Then your check account or savings account or whatever account code will come. Then your branch code will come. Then the account number, currency or whatever, everything will be there with a valid IBAN number. So every Sri Lankan will have a unique number for his account, right? So likewise, when you have IBAN number, say Sri Lankan dealing with a European, right? European supplier. The European supplier sent him an invoice to remit 10,000 euro, right? So the 10,000 euro he has given his IBAN number. Now, what is happening when the IBAN number is given, right? So the importer he sends via email. So the importer download the invoice as attachment received through the email. He download it and take a printout and go to the bank and he signs. When he signs the TT application, now most of the banks has got into this issue where they lost thousands of dollars or thousands of euros. So they prepare the TT application. When there is IBAN number, they say, please check with the beneficiary before you remit the money. There's a clause they put it. I don't know, every bank follow this. But when we learn this malpractices, this bad practice, this fraud happening between this fraudster, we have informed our team to incorporate in the TT application, auto TT application, a special clause when the IBAN account number is there. Make sure that you check with the beneficiary the account number is correct. I will tell you the example, give an example, right? This is the real story. So we have an import client who got a euro 45,000 payment to be made, euro 40,000, I suppose, to be payment to be made, euro 40,000 to be made against IBAN number. He brought down an invoice to us, import of some material, machinery from Germany. So he got the invoice and downloaded from him. Then a bank has executed the payment has gone, right? To see what has happened, once the payment is gone, he has not received, after sending 40,000, he expecting a machinery to come. So the payment term is advance payment. So Japanese, the German supplier has not communicated him for 2 weeks time. After 2 weeks time, the importer communicated and say, hey, what happening? I sent you the money 2 weeks ago. Have you shipped the goods? He said, what? No, we have not received the money. Then to see the German guy, can you send me the TT, that telegraphic transfer that you executed through your bank 2 weeks ago? So this guy go to the bank, convincing them to get a copy of the TT, the MT 103 copy, customer transfer message sent through the SWIFT, and image send it to the seller. Seller look at that and say, no, hey, this is not our account number. To see what has happened, when the seller, Japanese firms, when they send the invoice to the Sri Lankan guy, the Sri Lankan guy were not aware that email was hacked, and the invoice that is sent by the seller, the IBAN number has been changed. The IBAN has been pulled out and different IBAN number is inserted. Now, he has come and download the invoice and given to the bank. Bank has done the payment according to the IBAN appearing in the invoice. To see that IBAN has been changed, intercepted, and altered. Nobody is aware. That is the reason these cyber crimes or phishing through this email and all, making losses to thousands of millions of dollars between countries by this fraudster taking the money. What happened? When they change the account number, remember, once the funds are within the matter of few seconds, they pull out the money because they get the SMS alert, the money has hit their account, they go and pull out the money. So most of the Sri Lankan bank had these bad cases where on behalf of the importer, they send the money and it has gone into the wrong person's account and they pull out the money immediately. They get a SMS alert. Now, how to avoid this? There's no way, only way to avoid this. At the time of filling the TT application, If the invoice has IBAN number, the bank should, I would rather say, bank should look at the invoice first. When the IBAN number is there, they should speak to the customer and say, look here, you have got an IBAN number. This account number uh, is IBANs. Therefore, it's better that you check with your ultimate supplier and whether this account number is tallies. You get his account number and tally, or WhatsApp it to him and ask. When you do that, most of the time it's prevented. This fraud is prevented. But in some instances, after advising to the customer, please check, the other exporters have denied and say, no, I know this better than you. You better send the TT. After sending the TT, within the matter of 2 to 3 days, they are coming crying and coming to the bank and say, sorry, it got into the wrong account. Can you stop it? There's no way stop it. Once you do the payment, next day money is pulled out. You got into the wrong account. So you might ask, how can that happen? When the beneficiary account, beneficiary name is ABC and the IBAN number is given, can't the bank check the title and the account number? No. Remember, there's no checking. When the IBAN number is valid number, bank won't check the title. There is immaterial. IBAN is only number required to effect the payment. They don't cross-check anything. These are stay-through process, HTP. Stay-through process means it is a machine-to-machine interface, and if the valid IBAN number is given, payment is processed. That is the reason we used to say, when somebody come with the invoice with IBAN number, please don't effect the TT. Get the customer personally to call and check. Sometime what happened, after telling this, when the customer calling them, communicating to their party, again via email. Just imagine they are using the mode, again the email they are sending. My banker want to recheck the account number. Can you check whether this account number is correct? And he will give us his number. So the fraudster intercept and say, perfectly all right, send the payment. So it is not the same email because you download it through the email. So your communication should be separate mode to communicate, because the email are only intercepted and fraudster did the changes. So you need to communicate the different mode, either phone call or mobile phone or WhatsApp message. There are so many ways available. Simply call him and say whether this is what I got the account number. Can you check the to see when you're checking? Definitely, if it is altered, then you will come to know the account number has been changed. So that is the only way to exploit. So the better advice, my advice to you, if you are working apparently in a TT department, or if you are processing outward payment, ensure when you are given IBAN account number, always better to check with ask the customer to check with personally, call the beneficiary and check the account number. Call the beneficiary. There's no other way. You have to call or WhatsApp it and get the account number and double check it. If it is the same number, you are fine. If not, it's a fraud. So you need to be aware of, right? Yes, what is this maritime piracy attack? This is something that you are well aware, right? This is Somalia, Malacca Strait, Nigeria, Gulf of Aden, South China Sea, that is especially Indonesia and Malaysia. There are so many pirates. What is their job? These pirates will, whenever the vessels are going, uh, these pirates will getting into the seawater and surround the vessel, and they will take the vessel and ask them to pay ransom. Otherwise, they will take the crew members' custody, and they will ask the vessel owner or the shipping company to pay substantial amount to free the crew members. So this is common occurrence happening in mostly these are sea places where the Somalia and Malacca Strait, because this is where the narrow access between two seas, the land, or where the vessels are going through the narrow path. It's easy to capture the vessels under that environment. These people coming with different boats surrounded the entire vessel with a ammunition, guns, and all. They take the custody of the crew member with the gunpoint. Then they will take the ransom. So this is piracy attacks common occurrence. So the people should either avoid the shipping route. Now see, this is how they look at. Some pictures are there. They look at the bigger picture, but they are in a small boat, right? Small ship or whatever you call it. It's a bigger vessel, so they are trying to surround it, right? So Now the vessels are taking place. They with the go with the security and all. Bigger vessel they don't approach. Bigger vessel they know, but smaller vessel they try to capture. This is a common occurrence. So right. Then moving on to SBLC, standby letter of credit. This is a some instrument where you need to be careful. This is used to protect payment, right? But the fraudster use it with the wrong intention. Sometimes I don't know whether your bank has experience. Sometimes you come with some of the customer comes and say, we are getting SBLC $200 million, the large value, right? Remember, as a banker, I think this is come with your experience, right? So when somebody talks about $1 million, 100 million, $200 million, remember, uh, generally that the amount suggests it's a fraud. $100 million we are getting SBLC 200 million. Some people say 500 million. So the more the amount increases, very unlikely the transfer going to take place. It is kind of a simply you can tag it as fraud, but you should not jump the gun asking for more information and diplomatically decline the transaction. So here, if the SBLC is a method they use to get a SBLC done by standby letter of credit, and they purposely asking the bank to issue a standby letter of credit for higher value. But in Sri Lanka, we have a limitation. We can't just issue SBLC. Local regulations are in place so that we will check the underlying transaction issue. But remember, this is common occurrence globally. So that is the reason some of the Sri Lankan, I don't know, counterparties approaches different banks asking whether the bank can issue. We are getting SBLC, whether the bank can lend the money against SBLC. No, it is not lending against SBLC. SBLC is a standby letter of credit. In the event of some non-performance, it will become it will be triggered as a valid document. So suppose say, now I was telling you, when you're studying LCs, mostly when it comes to LC, the importer got affected. Why? Import open the LC, ultimately he is not getting the required stock, he is getting something else. So therefore, by opening LC to unknown, unscrupulous exporter, to cover yourself, you have to get a performance. So SBLC done. So when you open the LC, you ask the exporter, I want the SBLC from you. But what happens as a Sri Lankan, we won't be able to dictate terms to the exporter. He might say, no, I won't open the SBLC. I don't want LC. I don't supply to you. So this is where the problem is. So we don't have any other alternative method. So we need to give SBLC. But giving SBLC in Sri Lankan context is for the limited transaction only you can give SBLC. But in general terms, globally, SBLCs are misused by uh, some elements, in the sense they with a willful they want to default the bank by taking SBLC. So they will ask somebody, okay, give me SBLC. So the poor banks, on behalf of the customer, issue SBLC. That SBLC will only become claimable when there is a non-performing. So they will create a fraudulent documents as if this transaction not taken place, and they will claim it under the SBLC. So you need to be careful. In Sri Lankan context, we need not to much worry about, because SBLC, where in Sri Lankan context, we don't issue it SBLC unless it's an authorized transaction, underlying contract transaction need to be there. But here what will happen, the elements that the people who are coming to us and asking SBLC whether we can get a SBLC grant a facility to make the bank into trouble. They will say, we have a reputed bank issues 100 million SBLC. Can you grant a loan against SBLC? Can you grant a facility? Your simple answer should be no. SBLC is not an underlying transaction. SBLC is only used as a tool in the event of a non-performance. So against which you can't grant a facility. That itself wrong. The request itself not structured. So SBLC need to be careful without actually making a shipment. They try to claim. The fraudster using this, the SBLC itself is a tool to use to avoid frauds, but the fraudster try to use this instrument to make fraud. So you need to be careful. By getting SBLC, the bank should not go and extend any facility. uh, the SBLCs are generally used to cover an underlying transaction. In the event the transaction doesn't take place, as a result, one somebody losing the money, in order to claim that only SBLCs are there. If not, SBLC is no use, right? So that should not be used in such a way. Uh, yeah, to recover the money from the applicant. So you should not issue this kind of instrument. Right. I think we come into the intellectual property, right? What is intellectual property? That is whatever copyrights, brand impression, patent floats that you done. Now KYC, this you do that. Not KYC, the brand like McDonald's, KFC, right? McDonald's, KFC, right? These are in Coca-Cola international brand. So these brands are registered with a patent. So when this intellectual, sometime what happen, you get international transaction where that particular commodity brand name is used, where that particular royal license is not valid. It is a fake. So they are sending you the uh, fake goods by using by giving the brand name as Coca-Cola, but it's in real name it's not Coca-Cola. So that kind of elements also taking place as a fraud in intellect. So the intellectual property rights is very important. You need to register your copyright. Whatever commodity you invent, whatever items that you invent, immediately get the trademark patent right register, so that if anybody using your patent right, you can take a legal suits against them, right? So that is where you need to aware of, right? So in international trade, the intellectual property rights is very important, because there are certain commodities are internationally branded. So when those commodities are exchanged between two parties, it has to be done by the authorized person who has the patent right registered, can only handle that transaction, or can supply the goods. So if some people who are stealing that brand and trying to forge you and sending it, you need to make sure the copyrights are checked. uh, Otherwise you will getting the fake goods with a branded item, right? Conclusion, what is the conclusion? Yeah, the international trade is a backbone of strong global economy, no doubt. Given the complexity, international trade is not realistic to eliminate every possible risk. It's not possible at all, right? You can't eliminate. There are inherent risks, there are external factors. How can you avoid the exchange rate going up? There's no way you could do it, right? You have to face the inherent risk, but still you take maximum precaution to mitigate the risk. That is the only way to do that, right? So the benefit of international trade, economic growth, business growth, yeah, outweigh the challenges and work involved in getting started. So you need, though the risk is there, there are growth, there are countries doing better. Now, if you take China, is they are gone into every global market, right? So you can say they are into almost all the markets. They are successfully dominating the global market, but there are inherent risks faced by smaller scale countries like us, developing country. We need to be careful when you are dealing with these counterparties, right? So the best practices, the only way to reduce the exposure, be aware of these kind of frauds are there. Be aware of what are the precaution measures you can take. If somebody comes and say, I'm going to export, what is the advice you can give it to me, right? As exporter, you can say, get the advance payment, the best way, or ask him to open LC, import, ask the importer to open LC. That is the only way to get rid of the payment risk, right? Then you tell him, okay, you insure the goods when you're exporting. So these are the advices you can give when you're booking a vessel. Make sure it's a logistic company, registered company. There are vessels, they purposefully damage your goods and claim the insurance, right? So you won't get any insurance unless you are taken from a reputed shipping company, right? That also happening. So you need to be aware of all these risks. A document can be fraud, document can be altered. So need to be aware of all these risks, right? So that is the conclusion. So we have 15 minutes time. Shall we try to quickly uh, answer a few questions? Banks are facilitating international trade by involving in movement of goods, combination of movement of goods and handling documents only, handling documents and effecting payments. So banks are facilitating international trade by involvement of in movement of goods. Are they involving in movement of goods? No. Combination of movement of goods. No, movement of goods is out. Handling documents only. Handling documents and effective. Which is the answer? What is the correct answer? The correct answer is, yeah, handling documents and effecting payments. The banks always handle documents and they are into effecting payment, right? Okay, question number 2. What is the most important risk as per the below risk in the international? As per the below risks in international trade, what is the most important risk as per the below? What are the risks given? Counterparty, political, transportation risk, documentation risk. What is important in the given 4 list? What is the most important risk? What do you suggest? Counterparty, political, transportation, documentation. What is important? When you are doing international trade, what is the key risk is what? Can anybody try? What is the risk? Doesn't matter whether you make the wrong answer. Just try. Counterparty or political, transportation, documentation. What is the risk? Yeah, it's a counterparty risk because you need to know which counterparty you are dealing with. The country can be politically affected, right? If your counterparty is correct, you still get the payment, right? If your counterparty uh, is a genuine person, though the country is not political sound, still he makes the payment. So the counterparty risk become key, right? The question number 3. What is the best way to mitigate fluctuation of foreign exchange rate risk in importer's point of view? To agree for a spot rate, to book a forward rate, to agree for a cash rate, to refrain from all above. If you are an importer, when the exchange rate fluctuation of foreign exchange rate, what is the best course of action you can take? Will you agree for a spot rate, which is 2 working day? Forward rate, you book a forward for a future rate. You agree for transaction today, rate also today, cash rate, or you refrain from all above. So definitely refrain from all above is wrong answer. What is the correct answer? To book a forward rate. Yes, that is the correct answer. Question number 4. What is the Incoterm used for an exporter to have a least obligation to perform? What is the Incoterm used for an exporter to have the least obligation to perform? Least obligation, free carrier, X work, FOB, free alongside ship. Free carrier, he has to keep it alongside the ship or handing over the goods to the named carrier. Free alongside ship, you have to keep it. FOB up to board. X works, yeah, answer is X works. He doesn't do anything. He just keep the goods ready, packed and ready at his warehouse. XW. X work, right. Question number 5. Which Incoterm requires the seller to unload the goods at the named place of delivery? Which Incoterm requires the seller to unload the goods at the named place of delivery? Unload the goods. DDP, DAP, DPU, CIP. Which term? Deliver duty paid. Is it unload taking place? Or delivered at place? Or delivered at place unloaded? Carriage insurance paid to? Which one is answer? I think we learn a new Incoterms, which is only term. The seller has to unload the goods, which is delivered at place unloaded. DPU is the answer, right? Okay. So we have a small case study. I think we have 10 minutes. We can try these questions. An exporter shipped goods on CIF London under Incoterms. CIF London under Incoterms 2020. The ship gets into trouble. The ship gets into trouble during its voyage from Colombo to London. The ships get into trouble during the voyage from Colombo to London. So there is exporter ship the goods from CIF London. That means the exporter has taken care of cost insurance paid up to London port. Under Incoterms 20, the ship get into trouble during the voyage from Colombo to London. While the vessel is going on the sea road from Colombo to London, the vessel got into trouble. The vessel got into trouble, right? Briefly explain who has to bear the responsibility for the loss. Who has to bear the responsibility for the loss? Now, under CIF, what is where the risk is transfer? What is the obligation of the seller under CIF? Cost insurance frame. So you study that, right? So briefly explain who has to bear the responsibility for the loss. So, so if I show you again the slide, if I show you the slide again, let me see. I can show you the slide here. Look at carefully, then look at the diagram and identify whether you can understand this question. CIF. Yeah, this is the term they're talking about. This is the CIF term they're talking about, right? So here they're talking about CIF. Yeah. See, under CIF term, what is the seller's responsibility? Delivery of the goods take place, the risk transfers from sellers to buyer at the point the goods have been loaded on board. If he meets that obligation, if the seller meets that obligation, that's all. Nothing, he need to bear anything. So the delivery of goods take place and the risk transfer from seller to buyer at the point goods have been loaded on board. If the seller made arrangements, seller is responsibly arranging and paying the cost of carriage to the named port of destination. Yes, if he made arrangement and the goods are given at that particular place on board, is responsibility is over. So your question should be covered here. Going back to the questions, yes. Yeah. Briefly explain who has to bear the responsibility of loss. Definitely, you can say the buyer has to bear the responsibility for the loss. The buyer has to bear the responsibility of the loss. You can write the answer. The buyer has to bear the responsibility of the loss. Buyer has to bear the responsibility of the loss. Since the seller has already meeting his obligation, seller is meeting his obligation, meeting his obligation, handing over the goods, handing over the goods, handing over the goods, handing over the goods, be loaded on board, being loaded on board, being loaded on board, handing over the goods, being loaded on board, being loaded on board. So at that point, if he has met, only buyer has to bear. He has met the obligations, right? So seller has met his obligation because he met his CIF Colombo, CIF London. So he had gone and given the container to the onboard. The vessel is fly on the journey. Only these losses happen. What action to be taken to recover the losses? So buyer has to claim it under the insurance. So answer is buyer has to claim the losses. Buyer has to claim the losses from the insurance company. Buyer has to claim the losses from the insurance company. Subject to adequate insurance cover is obtained. Subject to adequate insurance cover is obtained. subject to adequate insurance cover, subject to adequate insurance cover has been obtained, subject to adequate insurance cover had been obtained, had been obtained. Preferably, preferably institute cargo clause A, preferably ICC institute cargo clause A, preferably ICC A, capital A, ICC also capital dash A, or within bracket A. Put it within bracket ICC capital within bracket A, ICC institute cargo clause A, which is the fully insured. You can take the losses, right? Would it be different situation in the event CFR London is used? Earlier CIF London, the case. Now they're asking, will the different situation, would it different in the event CFR London is used? Whether CIF, whether CFR, you should know this, right? Whether CIF or CIF, CFR or CIF. Look at this. This is where the diagram end for you. Look at the CF cost and freight. It is the same risk point. Here the seller is responsible for arranging paying cost of carriage. Both is paying cost and carriage. For CIF, he's paid the insurance also, right? But here, the important point, yes, handing over the goods, the risk is transferred from seller to the buyer at the point goods have been placed on board the vessel. Goods have been placed on board the vessel. So that is the place. So you can say the answer is, and if you look at the CIF, same again. Goods have been handed over, goods have been loaded on board the vessel. So both are same. The answer is, you can go back and write to the, can check the questions again. What are the questions that have been asked? Yes. Yes. The question is, would it be different situation in the event of CFR London is used? No. No. Answer is no. Since CFR and CIF, since CFR and CIF, the obligation of the seller, obligation of the seller or the risk transfer, or the risk transfer from seller to buyer, or the risk transfer from seller to buyer, risk transfer from seller to buyer, at the point the goods have been, at the point the goods have been loaded on board, loaded on board, loaded on board of the vessel, loaded on board of the vessel. Even though seller, I will repeat, at the point goods have been loaded on board of the vessel, even though seller, even though the seller, even though the seller, uh, even though the seller not obtaining insurance policy under CFR, even though the seller not obtaining insurance under CFR term, CFR term, as it is the responsibility, as it is the responsibility of the buyer, as it is the responsibility of the buyer, as it is the responsibility of the buyer to cover the risk, to cover the risk, right? So the last question, by using each Incoterms, that is CIF London and CFR London, CIF London, CFR London, at which point the risk transfer from seller to the buyer happens respectively? By using the Incoterms CIF London or CFR London, at which point the risk transfer from seller to the buyer happens respectively? Yeah, both are same. So you need to tell the examiner, or you need to tell and say, in both CIF and CFR London, CIF London and CFR London, in both CIF and CFR London, the risk transfer from seller to buyer, the risk transfers from seller to buyer, risk transfer from seller to buyer, at the point goods have been, at the point goods have been, at the point goods have been, goods have been loaded on board of the vessel. Goods have been loaded on board of the vessel. Goods have been loaded on board of the vessel. On board of the vessel. Okay, I think that's end our sessions, right? So coming Saturday, I will not be in a position to take the session on this coming Saturday. So I will keep the IBSL informed. I don't know whether they can shift it on Sunday. If not possible, if possible, we will have it on Sunday. On Sunday, if possible, I will talk to IBSL, because Saturday I won't be able to take the next session. But I have 4 more sessions to cover. We cover the entire trade now. Trade, foreign bank, correspondent bank, Posto Nostro, then trade payment terms, then financing, and the risk part. So the entire trade is now fully covered. So we will moving on to the foreign currency accounts and the capital current transactions, and probably FCBU, offshore banking, and all other. So we have 4 more sessions to cover. So probably, if I'm not taking the next week, probably meeting you weekend after the next, right? So see you then. If possible, meet you Sunday, or if not, see you in the week after next week. Okay.